Mount up! We're coming!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and well, the other night I said, I'll go live as news comes about, and the NFL world just decided to take a whole big old bucket of news and pour it on us. I guess we should have known that was coming on a Friday, but just a reminder, though, throughout all of free agency, whenever news drops, I will be here to break it down, and then we're going to have a huge free agency special. We're going to have a show when free agency launches on Monday, and then later on in the evening to react to everything that happened, so covering it from top to bottom. But why don't we dive right into a bunch of different things pertaining to the Minnesota Vikings today, starting with the retirement of Ryan Kelly. Now, this is something that we had a pretty good idea was going to happen. We thought either he'll retire or they will let him go based on his contract. And I'll read you what Ryan Kelly posted on Twitter. He said, 10 seasons. What an incredible ride it was. I was blessed to be around some of the greatest people in the sport has to offer, and I always wanted to leave each place better than how I found it. And with that, I hang up my hat. With that, I can hang my hat. Forever grateful for my family and brothers. Cheers. So Ryan Kelly retiring does, of course, open the door to what are the Vikings going to do at center. We'll get to that in just a second, because my hypothesis for what I think they're going to do might not be particularly exciting to anyone. But I want to say first that Ryan Kelly deserves an enormous congratulations on an incredible NFL career. He was a first-round draft pick and was part of some of the best offensive lines in the NFL during his entire career. He is one of those players that when you get even a small chance, like I did, to be around Ryan Kelly, you are amazed by his intelligence, his leadership, and honestly, his physical talent as well, because this is a guy who's a first-round draft pick, and even though he wasn't at the same level as a Minnesota Viking for the brief time that we saw him, that he was when he was a member of the Indianapolis Colts at his absolute peak, there were still plenty of times where you saw Ryan Kelly in there commanding the offense, dealing with guys who were blitzing, guys who were running stunts and twists, and he would just stand them up. I remember the first night against the Chicago Bears when I went back and watched the tape from that game, and the Bears were running all sorts of stunts at them. And there was one play, I think it was J.J. McCarthy's touchdown to Aaron Jones. And you never notice this in real time, like who made the block and what happened, unless it's something really crazy that jumps out at you. But they ran a stunt, and someone was coming free, and Ryan Kelly stepped right in front of them and just stuck them in place. J.J. McCarthy, clean pocket, bang, touchdown. I will wonder, probably always, what this season would have turned out to be, and I know the offense was never going to be a top 10 offense, but how things might have been different had Ryan Kelly had an opportunity to play 16 games or 17 games for the Minnesota Vikings, because not only did they lose out on the leadership skill, the intelligence, the toughness, the honestly blocking talent. I mean, just such a talent when it came to pass protection, one of the 5 best in the NFL. I think PFF, even though it's a small sample size, still graded him as one of the 5 best offensive linemen at the center position last year. So considering the value of that position, the way the defenses are played now, the amount of complex blitzes and rushes and all the different things that defenses are copying from Brian Flores to throw at offenses, how would they have looked had Ryan Kelly gone tape to tape with the Vikings last year? I mean, is it worth an extra win? Probably in there somewhere. I mean, they were having to throw out Michael Juergens and then Blake Brandel, who had never played center before and did a good job of adjusting to it, but had never played center, versus Ryan Kelly, who was clearly one of the best in the entire NFL. It's a phenomenal career for him. Just hate the way that it went down last year with him trying to come back one more time and then suffering another concussion. And at that point, you said, this is about a guy and his future, and he cannot come back to the NFL. But I think as hard as he worked to try to come back, shows you just how much he cared about football, how bad he wanted to succeed as a member of the Minnesota Vikings. It did not end up working out, but he gave it everything that he possibly could have. And unfortunately, it ends up not being the signing that they hoped it would be. It's hard not to, put the two things together, right? Of like celebrating the career of one of the best players over the last 10 years and someone who is a multi-time Pro Bowler, as good as it gets with the leadership, the locker room, how he approaches the game, the intellect. I mean, that sort of stuff, it's rare and it's very difficult to emulate. And you see maybe 2, 3, 4 centers at a time in the NFL at any time that could play at the level of Ryan Kelly. And if he was in there for 17 games and they had that level of center play, even with the other pieces coming in and out, even with Darrisaw's struggles, even with, Jackson being in and out, or Will Fry starting to fade a little bit at the end of the season, a guy like that could kind of carry you and could kind of drag you through those things. And to not have him was a really bad break for the Vikings last year. But I am glad that I got to see it, because through the last 10 years, I mean, how much have we talked about offensive line play, interior offensive line play? We have a commenter who calls himself guard guy because everybody was guard guy for so long. And to watch that tape and then to talk about it each week with Jeremiah Searles, even if there wasn't a lot with Ryan Kelly, it was, okay, this is how good this can be when you have a great center. And I agree that it did not help JJ McCarthy that much to not have his center in there to guide him through this last season. So Kelly calls it a career, just tremendous success in the National Football League as someone who was a first-round draft pick and just completely respected across the NFL as one of the best. But we have to go to the other part of this, which is what is next at the center position for the Vikings. And my take on that as of right now is it's probably Blake Brandel. I was looking through the free agent options again, and at one point I thought, well, Luke Fortner from the New Orleans Saints might be a pretty decent option, or there's a couple of other guys bouncing around free agency, then there were a couple guys released, and you're like, okay, maybe. And then you see the way that the Vikings are approaching this offseason, and there's really not a case to be made that they're going to go out and outbid anyone for these centers. And then when you look around the NFL and how desperate, which we'll also get to, the Chicago Bears filled their spot, how desperate teams are for the center position. I mean, how are you going to outbid other teams if you're tightening the purse strings? And when you look at the way that Brandel played last year, there's some moments that are yikes for Blake Brandel. And we could think about how he looked against Jalen Carter, though most people would look pretty rough against Jalen Carter. But something to consider about Brandel versus any other center is that you're either going to have JJ McCarthy or a new starting quarterback next year. And what do you need? Somebody who knows the offense. And Blake Brandel has been here this entire time. So if there was a very small difference between Luke Fortner at center or Blake Brandel, you're going to take the intellectual part of that. You're going to take the person who can command the offense, not in the same way, of course, as Ryan Kelly, but at least in a way with full understanding. And they didn't change offensive line coaches either. So, I mean, they did, but they didn't change offensive line coaches from a guy that was here last year. So Keith Carter is being moved up. Chris Cooper is out, but it's the same fundamental stuff. It's not like someone's coming in as a new offensive line coach and saying, all right, we're changing everything about how it's done. There will be tweaks, but it's going to be within the construct of the same system. So Brandel makes the most sense. You have Juergens behind him who at least can get into the game and play. He was not exceptional when he did, but he was in there, not a total and complete disaster. And I think you can still draft a center, but it's probably going to be in the third round rather and get maybe a project to develop for a year in a very tough position to step right in. That's, I think, the best option rather than going out and spending money and then realizing that the amount of improvement isn't that much. And if Brandel spends his entire offseason on it, remember, this guy never took a snap in a game or gave a snap in a game. He had to be thrown right in there and then, hey, buddy, and there were some errant snaps and there were some issues at times, but now an entire offseason, and maybe there is some advantage to having someone of his size play the center position. So that's my guess. We'll see what actually ends up happening. I just feel like if they're not going to spend a lot of money, you cannot get a center on a shoestring budget. It just doesn't work that way. You might as well just slide your guy into that center position who's already done it last year. And I would say it was not a disaster. I think that he handled it okay, and he can improve onto next year. This also probably was the tipping point for me. And we knew that this was coming. We knew more likely than not, Hargrave was going to be gone and Aaron Jones was going to be gone. And Jonathan Allen, ever so slight surprise, but definitely not a huge surprise. The Grenard thing, we'll see if he actually ends up getting traded, but that did come as a bigger surprise. But when you look at the accumulation of last offseason and the decisions they made, Garrett Bradbury ends up starting at center in the Super Bowl for the New England Patriots. Sam Darnold ends up as the starting quarterback. Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen did not produce or even fit in the way that any of us expected. Aaron Jones was injured a lot and did not have the same burst when he was in there. Even contracts of guys that are still here. Byron Murphy got restructured today, did not live up to the contract last year. I thought he was fine, but it didn't live up to that huge dollar figure. It has to be one of the worst off seasons in recent NFL history. I don't have an analysis of every single offseason of every one that had gone wrong with spending, but considering the expectations and the results, and some of them aren't their fault, you could see why they signed Ryan Kelly, an exceptional pass protector, an exceptional leader for your young quarterback, and they were looking to improve on Garrett Bradbury's pass protection, which had never really held up when he faced the certain types of players, right? Kenny Clark, Akeem Hicks, those guys where Ryan Kelly could. And it made sense to get interior defensive linemen who could get after the passer. And I would argue that it largely worked, but if you end up having to take the L a year later on those guys and pay huge dead cap money, and you have Javon Hargrave, who's kind of tweeting through it a little bit, I think about playing for Brian Flores, that didn't really work out either. And I think Jonathan Allen, you could certainly see coming at the time. Aaron Jones was another one that felt very risky. And I think we all understood bringing back Aaron Jones. But when you start to go against, and this was really the issue with last year in the offseason, and even as it pertains to Ryan Kelly, when you start to go against these warning signs, you go against the injuries, you go against the age curves, you go against the history, and you overpay for all those things, you're kind of asking for this to end up happening. And a year later, last offseason looks incredibly rough. Also, when you hand the ball over to a quarterback who'd never played before versus one that won 14 games, there's a reason that had never happened before, but we've broken that down already. So let's move on to some other news. The Vikings did another expected thing, which is they restructured the contracts of Justin Jefferson and Christian Darrisaw. And Tom Pelissero, reporting on this, called it a simple restructure, which I believe is just not adding a bunch of void years, but just converting money. So they create a bunch of cap space there. I believe 27 million created between those two. We knew that they were going to have to redo some contracts. Clearly, Rob Brzezinski said at the Combine, I don't want to be restructuring every possible contract and kicking every possible dollar down the road, but you got to do some or you're not going to be cap compliant. And that also goes for Byron Murphy, who, according to Troy Chapman, friend of the show from overthecap.com, they created over $11 million by restructuring Byron Murphy. And if you start to do the math, carry the one, they should be cap compliant pretty quickly. What I'm interested in is Jonathan Allen and whether it's going to be a June 1st, because that's much more beneficial to the cap for this year, is to post June 1st him. But even if they don't, I believe if I'm adding this up correctly, they were 45 over. You make 11 from Byron Murphy. You make 27 from Darisaw and Jefferson. That gets you really close. You cut Javon Hargrave and let's see, Ryan Kelly retires. And I think you're there. I think you're cap compliant at that point. And then the question is, how much money will you end up making through other types of things? So they've started to do these restructures, but the most interesting one that still remains up in the air, because now we've gotten a lot of resolution. We know that Ryan Kelly's not going to be here. We know the interior defensive line is going to need some work, and players are going to have to step up. Well, we know that they're going to restructure certain guys to make do and get to the cap floor. We know that the running back position is going to be something they have to look at. But what happens with TJ Hawkinson is interesting. Do you think they are going to restructure that, redo it, work out something with his agent to kind of rework that contract to lower the cap hit and just redo the deal? This is the fascinating thing about the NFL is you can just sort of do what you want with the contracts, but the player and his side has to agree to do it. If Hawkinson really wants to remain a Minnesota Viking, that may be the discussion that's happening is if you want to stay here, we got to work out something to change this salary cap hit. And eventually it may end up resulting in him being released next year or who knows. But if they can't do that, then a restructure is still possible. And it's very similar to a cut. But the cut, you don't have to pay the cash. You restructure and you got to pay the cash. You cut and you have to pay the guarantees, but you don't have to pay the cash that's not guaranteed. So that is going to be interesting. I think that Kevin O'Connell is really going to want TJ Hawkinson, especially if they are looking at Kyler Murray. Who was Kyler Murray's best friend in Arizona? That was Trey McBride. I think the tight end position is very, very important, which by the way, do have a guest coming on the show a little later, Alex Clancy, who's going to break down Kyler Murray. Host of the Locked On Arizona Cardinals podcast. And I asked him about everything that we've been discussing and all of the things that I've been researching over the last couple of, it feels like months. Is it weeks? I guess with Kyler Murray. So you want to stay tuned for that. That's going to happen in hour number 2 of the show. Let's move on to our next big news item from the National Football League, which is Geno Smith will be released by the Las Vegas Raiders. Adam Schefter reporting that today, and the Raiders will be eating his salary, which means what? That the Vikings could sign him for $1 million if they want. With Geno Smith, there are some complications here. I did wonder, is Clint Kubiak going to say, hey, why don't we just keep Geno Smith? But they must have somebody that they are thinking about to play in front of Fernando Mendoza, because the reports have made it pretty clear out of Las Vegas that the Raiders do not want to play Fernando Mendoza right away, which I think is the smartest thing. We know that. I'm always going to be forever and always on the pro side of developing a quarterback for a year rather than throwing him to the wolves, especially with a team that is rebuilding. But Geno seemed like a fine person to do that with. I mean, he's still, I think, a talented quarterback, even if he has had a decline and a serious decline last year under very bad circumstances. But I thought, well, maybe it makes sense, and we'll have to see. No surprises, though. They end up cutting him, so they must be looking at someone else in Las Vegas that they can bring in, which leaves Geno Smith. Now, here is the other question about Geno, which is, do you want to be locked in as the starter, or do you want to, or are you willing to compete with JJ McCarthy? Because the way that we have talked about Geno Smith is if it's Kyler Murray and Geno Smith and they're like bunched together as the two favorites for the Minnesota Vikings, but I see them as quite different, not only in stylistically, but also when you think about recent performance and age. Kyler Murray has still, in his most recent performance, played like a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, last year it's only a handful of games, but even if you look at those games, there are a couple in there that are fantastic. He gets beaten up by the Seattle Seahawks that destroyed everyone, but he's got a great game in there against the 49ers where his receivers couldn't stop dropping balls, but he plays extremely well. His recent performance looks like a top 15 quarterback, whereas Geno Smith's recent performance looks like a bottom 5 quarterback in the entire NFL, which says to me, if you're signing Kyler Murray, he is your starting quarterback day one. There is no competition. He is your guy. Now, you can come out and say, well, we're not naming our starter in OTAs or whatever. I promise you Kyler Murray's taking every single rep because he's not coming to the Minnesota Vikings if he has to compete. But with Geno, it would be a different story. I think you're saying to Geno Smith, you have to come to Minnesota and compete with J.J. McCarthy because McCarthy could potentially beat him out. We don't really fully know after 105 sacks over the last 2 years and the league lead in interceptions, where is Geno Smith and how quickly could he get into this offense? And is he going to protect the football? And how does it look physically? Because you are talking about the age. And I remember we went through this with Kirk Cousins, where we think that quarterbacks can just play till they're 43 because Aaron Rodgers did it. But I went through the quarterbacks and tried to find guys that played deep into their 30s. And you won't be surprised by this. Most of the middling or average or even slightly above average quarterbacks, they only played well into their early 30s. And by 34, 35, 36, this is like the Jay Cutlers of the world. We're falling off the face of the earth. And it happened with Kirk because of an injury, but injuries are part of that as well. So you'd be taking a risk that the age curve also does apply to quarterbacks, and that's why it would be more of a competition. Now, if Geno is looking more at, hey, I could go to Arizona if they're not going to get Malik Willis, or I could go to Miami, or even, what's Pittsburgh doing? Does Pittsburgh have an answer? I could go to Pittsburgh, where there's no young quarterback who was recently drafted in the top 10 for you to compete with. So that's the question that arises for Geno Smith, because yes, the Vikings are better, but I think once you reach a certain age and a certain level of performance in the league, you're probably thinking, I want to play. I've only got so many years left and maybe I can turn something around. That might be more of his mentality. And I don't know Geno at all. I don't know anything about him other than, what everybody else knows. I haven't been around him. I haven't talked to people who know him super well from like a personality standpoint. So I don't know if he is the type that wants to be the mentor guy or if he's the guy that would really prefer to just play. And maybe we'll find out with where Geno Smith lands. But at very least, the options have presented themselves throughout this week, including with Aaron Rodgers going on Pat McAfee and saying nothing is decided about his return to Pittsburgh. So the options are looking like, all right, is it Kyler Murray choosing the Vikings? If he doesn't, then is it Geno Smith choosing the Vikings and competing with J.J. McCarthy? If that doesn't happen, trying to go down the list, could they shuffle more money around or structure a contract for Malik Willis to be their guy? Would they consider at that point, if they lost out on Murray and Smith, who've been often touted as their top two options, would they put in an offer for Daniel Jones just to see if Indianapolis lets him go? There is a little bit of it gets dicey if Kyler goes somewhere else and so does Geno. Then you're looking around going, okay, what happens now? Where is Kirk in this mix? Is Kirk the next option? So I'd be very curious about, there's probably a board somewhere in TCO Performance Center. If this, then this, then this, then this, then this. My guess on what that board looks like would be first thing is Kyler Murray. And if that doesn't happen, then it's Geno Smith. Then I would think that Malik Willis would be next because you're still looking for best case scenario for somebody to be your quarterback over multiple years. I don't know how much they like Malik Willis, but he's got to be on that list somewhere. And then after that, you're at Kirkland and you're at Aaron Rodgers land. And if those two didn't happen, if Kirk went and worked for CBS and Aaron Rodgers decided to move to, some other country and live in a tree, then is it Joe Flacco and draft Nussmeier or something. I don't even know. So this gets it gets a little bit hairy if Kyler Murray decides to go somewhere else. But we'll see. If Murray goes to Atlanta, which I think is the other favorite, then Geno becomes the favorite for the Vikings quarterback situation. And those of you sort of hanging on to the maybe JJ will get a chance to compete, I think he very much would be in that mix if Geno Smith is here. Speaking of Kyler Murray being the favorite, from Connor Hughes, who covers the New York Jets for SNY, tweeted this today regarding Kyler Murray. He said Kyler Murray was discussed by the Jets, but he is expected to sign with the Vikings per sources. No Kirk Cousins, but watch Geno Smith and Carson Wentz, which he also reported that Frank Reich wants Carson Wentz to start. And wow, Jets, yikes. I mean, Carson, I think, is a fine backup quarterback, and had he stayed healthy last year, maybe he could pull off one more win. I think he beats Philadelphia at home if he had not had that shoulder injury, but he's going to get injured with the way that he plays. We saw that he just doesn't really protect himself, but this is the first report there that's saying from anyone in the industry anywhere that Kyler Murray is expected to sign with the Vikings. Now, more likely than not, that is the opinion of someone from the Jets, because he's a Jets reporter, and this is entirely coming from a Jets lens. So if you are inside the Jets organization and they're making their list and they're going, do we want this person, that person, that person? They are saying to each other, Kyler's going to be a Viking. But I don't know if that locks it in, that it's for sure, or if Kyler has started to tell teams that they're out or what his plans are going to be. It can be official next week at the end of the week, but I mean, if you agree to become someone's quarterback, I guess it could happen anytime that Kyler could announce his decision of where he's going to sign, because again, there's no negotiation. It's not like you're pumping up your price. You're making $1 million. So this is our first indication from anyone that is not just speculative, but more of a report that there is an expectation in the league that the Vikings want to sign Kyler Murray. Let me get to one other big news item of the day, which is the Chicago Bears have their center, and it's a familiar fella, which is Garrett Bradbury. So Bradbury last year signed with the New England Patriots after being released by the Vikings, and now he has been traded for a 5th-round pick to the Bears. Remember, Drew Dahlman earlier this week retired. Chicago also traded DJ Moore to the Bills and picked up some draft capital and some cap space there. So clearly they're making space. They also released Tremaine Edmonds, so they are making a lot of cap space to make some sort of move. I don't know if this is Max Crosby or what exactly they are looking at, but getting Bradbury now, he's back into the division. They want a center who can guide their young quarterback. And Bradbury, well, he does have his shortcomings, is just coming off a season where he guided Drake May all the way to the Super Bowl as the center. So they've got their answer, but the Lions don't have theirs. Green Bay doesn't have theirs. And I think the Vikings do in Blake Brandel, but I don't know that for sure by any means. So there's your kind of news rundown of the day. And here's what I did with this. Also the exclusive rights free agents, the guys who we totally have expected them to just, retain. Jalen Redmond, we already knew about. Xavier Scott, Kevin Seifert said is expected to be retained. Also, Bo Richter is being kept around. I mean, these are moves that are obvious. It's $1 million, exclusive right free agent. You just, push that button and keep those guys who are young and do not cost much and play on special teams, which is now very important. Before I get to, so here's what I did. I went through with what the Vikings have done so far, and I created an offseason around it with the sticktothemodel.com simulator, offseason simulator. And I did it with a little more intent than the other night where I was kind of flying around and searching for things and stuff like that. So I did it earlier and I've screen grabbed my results. It actually gave me an A this time. It's been such a hater for all my offseason attempts before, but it did give me an A this time. Here is the FanDuel question of the day. We've focused a lot on the rest of the NFC North, obviously, for clear reasons. But is there a team this offseason that scares you? So right now, I'm going to give you in the NFC, the division, the teams that are favored to win the division. Philadelphia at plus 105, Detroit plus 160, plus 160 for the Tampa Bay Bucks, and plus 130 for the Seattle Seahawks. Is there a team that you think this offseason they could blow up, they could make the big moves, they could do something to get themselves over the hump, and who would that be? That is the FanDuel question of the day. So let me get you to my offseason simulation, and then we'll get some questions, comments, thoughts, and so forth. And then I want to bring you Alex Clancy, who talks in depth after covering Kyler Murray's entire career in Arizona. I promised that I would get a guest, and Alex does a great job of breaking it down. So I'm going to get you that in just a minute. But here's my simulated offseason now, considering what we know. And one thing I was trying to figure out as I was doing my cuts and restructures is whether Jonathan Allen will be a June 1st. I did that because it created the most cap space for me, and I was trying to help myself. So I did post June 1st, Jonathan Allen, Ryan Kelly, Aaron Jones, Javon Hargrave were the cuts, and the restructures, Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, and Byron Murphy. I did not do anything with TJ Hawkinson just yet. And if you look and squint all the way at the bottom there, what you will see is I traded Jonathan Grenard for 2 draft picks, a second and third rounder, to the San Francisco 49ers. Not necessarily ideal to be giving them to an NFC foe, but it was the best deal that I could get on the simulator. And if the Vikings, this is where it's hard with Jonathan Grenard. Every time I think about that situation, every time I'm like, man, that's a really good football player to not have on your team. But there's real benefits of trading Jonathan Grenard, which is why they're considering it. $20 million in cap space plus a second and third round draft pick came back from the 49ers. That's a lot of stuff that they need, cap space and draft capital in places where you could get top 100 draft picks. I know that I've obsessed over this, but if you never have top 100 draft picks, if you have 8 top 100 draft picks over a 4-year span and you hit on half of them, which is kind of what the Vikings have done, if you hit on half of them, you still didn't get very far. That's still 4 players. I mean, they've hit on what? Addison, Jackson, let's just call Dallas Turner. So what is that? 3? And they missed on Lewis Seen. It's the jury's still out, I guess, on JJ McCarthy, but that's more of an organizational thing. So even if we call it like 7 and they went 3 for 7, I don't know, whatever it was on the top 100 picks, Andrew Booth Jr. didn't work out. Ed Ingram didn't work out. It's not a terrible rate. And yet still you end up with very little. So they need that. Mac Jones, I just feel like they're not going to do it with Mac Jones. Maybe I should have thrown that into the trade, but in this simulation, we're just assuming Kyler Murray is the quarterback. That's how I went about it, is I'm just making the assumption that it's Kyler Murray or Geno Smith, and it's just $1 million. So that's what I got, and that's what I did with the restructures and cuts that we already know about. So free agency, I did go a little bit crazy for guys that don't cost very much. So I re-signed Eric Wilson. I made the other obvious signings like Andrew DePaula, no question there. Ryan Wright, no question there. Brought those guys back. And then I went into free agency with the mindset of I am going to spend as little money as possible, but also make this make sense. So I signed, let's see, a number of players, and I'm going to run through them with you real quick. As far as a wide receiver, I think that they need a depth wide receiver. They could draft one. They could develop Ty Felton. But I got Olamide Zaccheaus, who always seems to show up as being pretty good. He was with Washington last year, or 2 years ago, with Jaden Daniels. He was with Chicago. I mean, he could play. And for $3 million. So I also signed a backup tackle, Andrew Wiley, who has been around, and he's played guard and tackle as someone who could be their swing guy instead of Justin School. Deshaun Hand is one of those run-stuffing defensive linemen. You could put him at the 5 tech, I guess, or just have him move bodies. Kind of a Jonathan Bullard type player. Got him for less than $2 million. Took a swing at edge since I already traded Jonathan Grenard. So just Azeez Ojulari, who was a former fairly high draft pick, hasn't really worked out, but you need to roll the dice when you're in scenarios like this of maybe you get a steal and you get a lot more value than you'd expect. Another defensive lineman, Sebastian Joseph Day. My thought is, yes, they have Levi Drake Rodriguez and Jalen Redmond and a couple of guys that are interesting, Elijah Williams and Ty Ingram Dawkins, but I think they need some proven veterans in that room because that's a lot of young players and young talent. It would be nice for them to get one or two more veteran players. Brought in Akilla Witherspoon as a veteran corner to be kind of a backup. And also picked up, I'm going to do this every time because I just like this guy. Alohi Gilman, you'll get tired of me talking about him because I just like him. I think he's a good player. So a safety, I brought him in. And then I got a fullback. I noticed that Miami cut Alec Ingold today. And Miami, that's where the Vikings, one of their new assistants came from, Frank Smith. So I think they need a fullback. I would not go through this offseason without it. So every sim should have a fullback. So those names right there are not exciting. These are not great players. These are guys that come along with risks. They have clear outlined roles, but we're trying to spend as little money as possible and get as much value out of it. So that was my aim. And then I went to the draft, and let me tell you about this draft because I traded down and I also traded Jonathan Grenard. So I ended up with a ton of draft picks. In fact, 7 of them in the first 3 rounds. And after I did this, I thought, this is the way. This is the way, folks. I took Avion Terrell in the first round after trading down. Then Derek Moore, an edge rusher from Michigan, because now edge rushers are in play. And everybody's kind of talking about how this is a really good edge rushing class. So I think that taking one in the second round is not a bad idea. In the second round, I also took Jadarian Price as the running back from Notre Dame. Jake Golday, I think it's Golday, right? From Cincinnati, a linebacker who's got some versatility to him. He's listed as an outside linebacker, but seems like he could do what Eric Wilson did for them last year and develop a little bit behind Wilson and Blake Cashman and then maybe be the guy. So there we have filled a corner, an edge, running back, and a linebacker position in the third round. Grabbed Jake Slaughter, who seems to show up in every one of my draft sims, Ted Hurst, the wide receiver from Georgia State, and Isaiah World, the offensive tackle from Oregon, because I think they do need to have an answer at some point for Brian O'Neill, and an answer at some point if Christian Darrisaw just does not turn out to ever get back to the same level. So there you go. I want to do this kind of every time, like when we have new information and when we have a lot of different breaks and stuff like that, then we, can simulate the off season again and kind of see what it looks like. So there's where we stand as of right now, and we can get to some questions, comments, thoughts, and feelings from you guys on Ryan Kelly. What are you thinking right now is really the question. I mean, what do you think of that offseason plan? What do you think about what's happened so far to the Minnesota Vikings? I mean, there's been a lot of news that's come down over these last couple of days and a lot of moves that are on the way that will be confirmed and finalized and so forth. And now you're talking about a lot of spots that are wide open and a lot of decisions still to be made for this Vikings roster. So I'm curious of what you guys think also about the fact that now there is at least one credible reporter out of New York saying that people are believing that Kyler Murray is going to be the Vikings quarterback. So I am interested in your thoughts. Let me pull up the chat here on the screen and we can have a little conversation about it. Now, my wife is broadcasting Big Ten basketball tonight, the Big Ten women's tournament on Big Ten Network. So I don't want to do this forever because I want to watch her game. But we can do it for a bit. And then I've got that interview with Alex Clancy coming up very soon. And don't forget to answer the FanDuel question of the day. So why don't we begin? KFT says Ted Hurst to be really good as a pro, and the Vikings will get someone to take Addison's spot in 2027. So here's my thing is look at what the Buffalo Bills had to give up for damaged goods in DJ Moore. And I think DJ Moore is still pretty good. And I know that there's the debates going on in Buffalo of, is he a top 30 wide receiver still? And this, that, and the other thing. One, I think if the Bears loved how that was working out with DJ Moore, that they wouldn't have done this. They would have found a way to keep him. So moving on from him, but it makes the point. What have I been saying now for 2 years about wide receivers? You can all say it along with me. The only way you can get them is through trading for an angry or broken or regressing one, because they never show up in free agency. So you have to draft them. And that was my choice this time. I'm intrigued by Ted Hurst. I think he would be a nice development project for them. And he has the athletic gifts and the production in college to be interesting. But what I like about this draft, and I saw Mike Renner talking about Antonio Williams from Clemson being an all-around type player, is every time someone shows me a new wide receiver from this draft, I'm like, ooh, that looks pretty good. I mean, Zachariah Branch is another one where, yes, they did throw him a bunch of screen passes, and yes, he is undersized, but he's also electric. And he might be there in the second, or he might be there in the third. There's some good wide receivers because there's so many of them who are going to get pushed down the board. Even though I am always a proponent of taking them in the first round, I think the second and third could be very robust for wide receivers. And Ted Hurst was the guy of choice this time, but I'm drafting one somewhere in the first 3 rounds every time I do a draft sim, because I just think it's really necessary. And you're right about Jordan Addison's future kind of being unclear. Tom said would hang on to Allen till you see what you can get in the draft. Do you mean Jonathan Allen? I mean, I'm a little surprised, not a lot surprised with Jonathan Allen. And I understand where you're coming from there of, well, he's under contract and you don't save that much money right away. So, I mean, that's really moving on from him based on, it would have to be also performance and fit, as well as creating some cap space for this year, unless it's a post June 1st. If it's post June 1st, then you're earning a lot of cap space. If it's not post June 1st, then I think it's maybe 6 million, which was why I initially thought that he would continue to be around. But you've got to consider that it didn't really work the way that they had expected it to work, because I think part of it is probably how they play with those defensive tackles. And gosh, I mean, who would have thought that, Jonathan Bullard and Harrison Phillips, man, and we talk about that offseason. I would say still that if Harrison Phillips had been with the Vikings last year, maybe you're not getting as many reps from Jalen Redmond, who was great. So I mean, I don't think that trade is as bad as some people have made it out. But if you throw that in the pot of an offseason where you went outside the building to get 2 defensive tackles to totally change how that D-line looks, and you move on from Harrison Phillips, and now we're sitting here saying, well, you know what they really need is like a Harrison Phillips. Like, man, that was one where, they aimed for something to resolve the issue of getting after the passer, but they probably were a little bit, the execution of that, like the idea of that is good and is right. I mean, look at the teams that succeed and look at the beast that they have on the interior of the defensive line. Look at Philadelphia, look at what San Francisco was like a couple years ago. Look at what we saw just last year from Seattle. It's winning having beast defensive tackles, but going out and just throwing every last dollar at 2 guys who had injuries or regressed, it's not a shock that it didn't work out. And Phillips, I think, might have helped them. There's a couple of games. Look at that San Francisco game. You look at the Atlanta game not San Francisco, Pittsburgh game and Atlanta, where maybe you get a run stop or 2 and it's a different result. And they weren't able to get those because they didn't have guys that could stop the run. That one will always be a little bit on the perplexing side. I think it's because they were so happy with Jalen Redmond and Levi Drake Rodriguez, which they should be, but maybe missed the forest through the trees a little bit there, just assuming it was going to fit great with Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, and they were going to be able to be all-around players when they projected much more as just individual pass rushers or rotational type of guys. So I get where you're coming from on, hey, maybe you should just hang on to him, but I think you should also consider that the performance wasn't that great and maybe the fit wasn't that great. and you might be able to find someone else for a couple $1,000,000 that actually ends up working out better when paired with Jalen Redmond. And maybe there is a draft pick. I didn't take a guy in this one at defensive tackle, but there will certainly be options in this draft if they want them for run stuffers. Feline Master P, Cisco, is probably the most interesting name that we have ever had on the show, and we've had a lot of great ones. Honestly, haven't felt this stuck in the mud since 2006. That's a little bit of a tough one, because where you're coming from, I think, is the correct global view of this, which is you're looking for someone else's quarterback to try to bail you out. You are hoping that a roster with a lot of holes can be patchworked together by Olamide Zaccheaus and Deshaun Hand, which is not really that great of a model. I mean, you can do that. They've done that before with some clever signings that have worked out, but they've also done it before, like 2020 to 2021, where you go out and get Bashad Breeland and bring back Mackenzie Alexander, and it just doesn't work out. And 2023 was like that. Dean Lowry, Marcus Davenport, these Kendall Wright once upon a time, they have a super high hit rate. Sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you make really great low-key choices. And I think that around the edges is a good place, like getting Isaiah Rodgers or getting Eric Wilson last year. It is a good place if you can identify the right fits, but all of them are free agents for a reason, and they all have a limited impact unless, and Rodgers was a little bit of a unique situation. He had been suspended for a year with a gambling thing, and he had been a part-time player, but had the potential to be a full-time player, was still pretty young as well. So they got a discount on him. Eric Wilson, I mean, I don't think anybody saw that coming. And the year before, when they spent a little more money, you get a deal on Andrew Van Ginkel. So they've had success with this, with not necessarily paying the most money. They didn't pay the most money for Blake Cashman either. If you're sharp, you can get a few of these to hit. But it took me trying to fill needs, signing like 8 guys to less than $3 or $4 million. Having them all work out to fill all those needs is pretty tough. So when you talk about stuck in the mud, you would be saying, what's the path to being a real Super Bowl contender? Can you look at what you have here and say, if they do this, if they make this move, if they get this player, then they can be there? That's a pretty tough case to make, because I keep checking the odds with different reports on FanDuel to see, are they changing with the idea that they might get Murray, or that I haven't heard anything about Derek Carr recently, but you never know. Like, that might be, I didn't even include that on my list because I haven't seen any updates for the, like, if this happens, this happens, this happens, but it should be in there. Is still a remaining possibility, because maybe he's a backup option if these other things don't work out. So I forgot him, but Daniel Jones or bringing Kirk back, it hasn't moved the needle at all. In the markets, you're projected to be last in the NFC North. You are projected to take on a lot of dead cap next year. You haven't hit on recent draft picks, and one of the hits is so questionable off the field that it's unclear whether you could sign him to a contract extension. I mean, if you're the Vikings right now, this was, I think, one of the reasons that they moved on from Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, is they know it's about to get pretty tough. They exist in this world where you could absolutely see all of this working, because we have before. Going into 2024, they were last in the NFC North odds. They were in some places 6.5 wins, in other places 7.5 wins, and it worked. And they won 14 games. But when your franchise is constantly in a spot where you're always asking kind of mini miracles to happen, well, reinvigorate this guy's career, hit on all these free agents in one offseason as they did in 2024, nail every single draft pick, and it'll be great. Well, as we saw from last year, now last year is excessive with the number of injuries and signings that went wrong and everything else, but it doesn't make you feel like there's a high chance that every single one of these things will go right. So where it feels like they're turning their attention to chasing a Super Bowl is a little more in the long term. Maybe if you sign Kyler Murray, he becomes your guy over multiple years, and then you can build up the rest of the roster through the draft, knowing that you have your quarterback in place. That's not a high chance, but it's a possibility. Or if you just get through this season as a fairly decent contending team, then maybe you're looking at rebuilding a bunch of spots through the draft, and the next version of the competitive rebuild gives you a chance to draft a quarterback, place him into a really good team, and take another swing at the thing that didn't work out. There is a little bit of faulty logic, I think, with, and I've said this myself, and then I heard someone else say it and kind of thought about it and went, maybe that's not the right way to look at this. Last year saying, hey, if they had Kyler Murray quarterback or Geno Smith or Kirk or anybody, that they would have made the playoffs. That's 100% true, but that doesn't mean that next year it all just fixes itself, right? I mean, you're playing this game of whack-a-mole that's been going on, as you're indicating, for a very long time, and that game of whack-a-mole is, all right, well, you got your cap a little bit better by moving out Allen and Hargrave, but those guys played like 1,700 snaps. So it does feel like it's not far away from being a good team or a competitive team. It is probably not feeling at all like someone that you're saying is going to be a Super Bowl favorite by the end of this offseason. And how are you going to get there? When is the next time you're going to go into a season as a Super Bowl favorite, as a top, let's even call it 7 Super Bowl favorite? Is it 2027? That seems like a stretch unless a lot of things go right. Is it 2028 after you've drafted your next quarterback and you've totally overhauled the roster again? I see what you mean. And the best thing that I could say is that we never really know how stuff's going to go on. But as we try to all play projecting front office analyst, where you're coming from is not absurd by any means. Rob or Rob, I've probably called you Rob forever, so I should stick with that. What about Falcons linebacker Caden Ellis? Great blitzer, better size. Big fan. Really, really like Caden Ellis. It always comes down to the point, and you're bringing up Martin Emerson too, and they like him, I'm sure, because he was great against them in the joint practices. It always comes down to what's the price. You're not the only one who knows Caden Ellis can play and would be a really good fit. So who's going to pay him more? And I had brought up Cam Curl on this show before as a safety from the Rams, and he signed for, I forget what it was, like $13 million a year. Like, well, Vikings are out on that. And so are these guys that you're talking about going to be, are they going to be, able to match anyone's price who wants to bring in Caden Ellis? Because I think he'd be a great addition. But what I was going for in simulating it was, let's pretend we have $0 and then kind of went after it. Also, Rob bringing up Dalvin Tomlinson. Could be. I don't know how they view him as a fit, but I don't think he's getting a huge contract from someone, and he could probably still play at his age. KFT, the Vikings will draft a center in their first 4 picks. That's what I've been looking at with somebody like Jake Slaughter or Connor Lew or Sam Hecht or Brian Parker. Like, those are the 4 centers, and I'm thinking 3rd round and then try to develop them behind Blake Brandel. The Magic Scientist says, I think Brandel was fine at center. Kirko Chains and JJ QB2 Wentz, Gainwell, Van Summer. I don't know who Van Summerin is. And Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel. I don't think so on that one. Resign Naylor. I don't see how that's going to happen. Trade Addison. You would have to do that. Yeah, you would have to trade Addison to re-sign Naylor. But even then, where's the money come from? Because you wouldn't be moving out money with Addison. You'd just be taking on money with Jalen Naylor. That's why it's never really made sense to me. Trading Grenard, signing a veteran edge, and having Jay Ward play. Yeah, I don't mind any of that. As far as Cousins playing quarterback, here would be my argument. So we just had this long discussion about how challenging of a spot the Vikings are in to get back to the point where anyone would say that they're Super Bowl contenders, which doesn't guarantee that they can't do that. Like, they weren't Super Bowl contenders in 2017, and I remember thinking they'll win 8 games, and, it's a crazy world. But And they do have a ton of talent still on the team, and they have good coaching, and they brought back Flores for a reason. So it's not like it's a 0% chance, but if you're looking at the Super Bowl odds right now, they're not even close to a team that's being considered. This is one of the reasons that I have advocated Kyler Murray for the Vikings is one, I think if it really clicks, then you could have well above average quarterback play. If it really worked, if it worked awesome, then we know that he's capable of that when he had DeAndre Hopkins and has had no one near that since. So it is something that's at least in there somewhere, kind of like with Sam Bradford. Like Sam Bradford had not had great seasons when he got to the Minnesota Vikings, but once you saw him throw the football, you thought, I mean, I could see it with Diggs and Thielen and so forth. I could see it with Kyler Murray. In fact, he's played better in his career than Sam Bradford really ever did, and he's definitely played better than Sam Darnold ever did. That's the one scenario where that could actually click and work out. There is no scenario in my mind where Kirk Cousins comes here and can win 12 games. If we were doing a who could I actually see it? If we were doing a game of talk me into and you made your best case, well, when Kirk Cousins was really good at football, they didn't win 12 games except for 1 year. And yes, they have a better defense now, but it's flawed. And his performance now is not what it was in 2021, where he was one of the 12 best quarterbacks, 14 best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's just really hard to convince me that that's possible. It's possible to get me to agree with you about Geno Smith. When you look at Geno in 2024 and his ability to throw downfield, he was legitimately the best or top 3 downfield passer in the NFL. Now, intermediate, not so great. Short, not so great. A lot of turnovers, lots of mistakes, but there's a variance factor where, okay, Geno comes in and just starts ripping it to Justin Jefferson in every single tiny window or whatever, and it all clicks and it all works, and they win 12 games. Okay. I think Murray, if we were doing percentages, Murray is like a 20% chance that happens. Geno's more of like a 15 or 10% chance that happens. Everybody else, Daniel Jones is a tough sell that he could actually get you there coming off an Achilles tear. Derek Carr is maybe around the same range as Geno. Everybody else, I mean, Malik Willis, I guess is possible just because he's a great runner and maybe there's something great in there. Everybody else is a pretty tough sell. So I think what I would want is at least there to be a chance with what happens this year and not entirely look at it like, well, who's the best mentor for McCarthy? I don't think you need to look at it that way. Yeah, Rob, the post-June 1st cut shifts more cash into this year, and they will need some of that space in season anyway. It's a smarter move. So yeah, that's why it kind of made sense to me to go June 1st. I don't know what they're going to do, though. I did it because the website gave me more to work with. That's why I did it. But I see what you're saying. KFT says, I think Geno makes the most sense with KOC's offense. See, I see that a lot, and I just can't quite make sense of it because there's been 2 different versions of Kevin O'Connell's offense. There was the Kirk Cousins version and there was the Sam Darnold version, and they look different on paper. Now, there is a lot of fundamental same parts, and it's the same playbook, I suppose, or at least a good percentage, but those are 2 very different quarterbacks who played very different for the Minnesota Vikings. When you look at how far the ball went downfield with Kirk versus how far it went downfield with Darnold, it's different. And I think that Murray would play more like Kirk Cousins, and I think that Geno would play more like Sam Darnold, only I think that he's more reckless than Sam Darnold and made more mistakes even than Darnold did. And he made some for sure, but I think Geno would make even more. And both of them, I think you can win with. I do think that those are the 2 guys you could actually win games with. Gobbling says, I doubt they get a 2nd and a 3rd, probably 2nd and a 5th. I mean, if I'm the Vikings, I'm not trading Jonathan Grenard unless I get a deal that I really like, because he's going to be 29. I think he could be good till he's 34, 33, 34. Those outside linebacker edge rushers, they age pretty well. I'm thinking of like Justin Houston. Even Kyle Van Noy is still in the league, and he was getting pressures last year. Those guys tend to last pretty well. So I wouldn't want to do it unless you feel like you have to, unless he's not going to play ball with his contract and he is going to really push for an extension that's very expensive and they don't want to afford it, or they get a really good offer. That's why I had it second and third, because I think they would need a really good offer. But you might be right about the actual worth that's out there. Jay says Geno is too old, and if he plays well, then we would not have him long term. Kyler would be better. That is another benefit of plausible outcomes that are not that likely, but is possible. If Kyler played well, he could be your quarterback for 5 more years if he played really well and you loved him. If he plays okay and you like him but don't love him, that's where it gets a little bit on the tricky side. But even then, we've seen that. We've seen that from Baker Mayfield with the Tampa Bay Bucks, where their contract for him after his good year, it was more of a we like you but don't love you. And the mid contract is very workable, as we've seen from Tampa and especially as we've seen from the Seattle Seahawks. The uber crazy expensive contract is harder, not impossible. The Jaguars just won a lot of games with Trevor Lawrence being paid a lot. It's not impossible to work around these quarterback contracts. But the mid contract that's very flexible, totally doable to build a roster around. So you're right about that scenario, that even if Geno came in and played well, you're still looking to do something else. Maybe go over to JJ, or maybe draft someone, or maybe you're back having the same conversation next year. That is a benefit for sure. Kids See Ghosts says, I'm pro Kyler Murray, yet not done with JJ yet. It's just crazy how much slander and negative info has come out almost weekly about him from all insiders except Tom Pelissero. Well, I assume you mean Tommy P, Tom Pelissero. Well, look, I talked about this a little bit the other night about the, negative info or whatever. I think that there's some misunderstanding there. When the results come out, and the results are you're the favorite to land Kyler Murray, which would mean JJ McCarthy's not playing. As reporters, what we're doing, whether it's myself, Alec Lewis, Kevin Seifert, whatever, is we are looking at all the information that we have gathered over a very long period of time. And we're saying, well, now that we know that the team is looking at other starting quarterbacks who would be QB1 from day one, and that's Kyler. Now that we know they're doing that, why would they be doing that? And then you start to pick things apart and you go, okay, well, they had to reduce the offense. The stuff at the end of the year with his, I'll just call it volatility as a quarterback. Up and down, high and low, getting penalties, being hurt on the sideline, not telling his coach that he's injured. It was just a circus sometimes with him. It was just up and down, the emotional highs and lows. He wins the one game against Detroit and it sort of felt like it was the Super Bowl or something. And then it comes crashing down. And then it seems like he's struggling with his confidence the very next week. Like, that volatility is very, very tough to deal with if you're the team, which I believe was also in an Alec Lewis report, but it's not like something we couldn't point to and show you anyway. Or the dumbing down of the offense that we couldn't point and show you anyway, that we already knew about because they were talking about the simplification. So what we know now, none of those things that have been brought up are brand new. They were all mentioned at different points. We know now how much they mean to the team. We know how much the team is now valuing those in its decision-making, which is a lot. So the idea, and I've seen people say, oh, they're trashing McCarthy. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's just that the explanation for why they wouldn't start him is right there in front of you. And if you were paying close attention throughout the season, you could have seen it coming. And now it's, let's accumulate all the evidence. Like if you were putting it on trial, that's what reporters do, right? We gather all of the evidence and then lay it out. Here's all the evidence of why they would pick someone else as a starter. And here it is in my story. It's not that a bunch of people, the minute we got to the end of the season, ran to all of us and said, this about JJ McCarthy. It's like, no, you're picking up things along the way, including the combine, which would be the most recent, as a place to pick up a lot of information. And you confirm a lot of the things that we saw with our own eyes that were out there. So I don't think, and by the way, I don't think that there's any being a victim for JJ McCarthy, if anything. There's a lot of people who have made him out to be the victim of, I don't know what, the victim of the media, the victim of the team, the victim of KOC, the victim of et cetera, et cetera. If anything, he's had bad luck. Injuries are mostly bad luck. And from that perspective, it's been unfair to JJ McCarthy because football is like that. And sometimes guys get hurt and it sucks. Look at Ryan Kelly. It's awful that Ryan Kelly has to retire. He had a lot left in the tank. He could have played 3-4 more years, but he got injured because football is a brutal sport that way. So that's not fair for him. But when it comes to a quarterback who was given an offense that other quarterbacks have succeeded with, the best receiver in the world, the coach of the year, and he was given the opportunity from day one to be the starting quarterback and went out there and did not succeed and did not play well and put out well below average numbers and got hurt numerous more times and did not handle it in the way that you would expect from a professional starting quarterback. I don't know what anyone is supposed to say about this other than this is why they're starting someone else. That doesn't have to mean, and when people say like, I still believe in JJ, that's fine because the guy is young and there's a chance to turn it around. And there's many, many quarterbacks who have, and I don't write anybody off until it's over, unless it goes, Josh Rosen in Miami you could probably write that off, but you don't write anybody off almost ever until it's really, really over, because there's always a chance that things could fit right and they could develop and they could improve and they could find their spot. But you also can't look at what happened last year through any sort of light and say, that's what an NFL team wants as its starting quarterback. I mean, your offense was 28th in the league. The numbers are what they are. The performance is what it is. The drama, or whatever you want to call it, was what it was. And the struggle to, it seemed, even just get McCarthy to play within the offense that KOC wanted him to play. And then for a guy who's got his team down in the dumps to go against his coaches and do something that they told him not to, it's like, man, this is pretty tough, right? So I see that a lot. I see the victim thing a lot. And I think, I don't know, man, the NFL, you got to perform. You have to put up numbers. You got to perform. You got to win games. And if you don't, they're going to find someone else. It doesn't matter how much people like you. It doesn't matter where you were drafted. That's how this league works at every position. I mean, Laquan Treadwell got passed by Thielen and Diggs, and I don't remember anybody making a bunch of excuses for him. In fact, all the other positions, Cam Bynum comes up and takes the spot from Lewis Cine. I don't remember anyone making a bunch of excuses for him. It was, hey, this is the performance, that's the reality, and that's now what it is. So, but also I don't think you're like out of bounds or crazy or anything for looking at some of the good things that you saw from McCarthy and thinking that this guy can still have a future. I don't think you're a crazy person at all for thinking that. I think under the right circumstances with the right amount of time that he can become a quality NFL starting quarterback. It's going to take a lot of work, but he can get there. That's why I keep using the Ryan Tannehill example. Is that Ryan Tannehill was kind of left for dead by Miami, got in the right spot, was a backup for a little bit for Tennessee, and then made it work. As a raw athlete who didn't throw a lot of passes in college, didn't have the greatest circumstance. I mean, I think that the Vikings are better than Adam Gase in Miami, but still, like it just wasn't the best situation for him, and he made it work. There's a lot of examples of that. The Magic Scientist, FanDuel answer is the Bears. The FanDuel question was, let me think of my phrasing. It was, what team are you kind of worried about in the NFC? And the Bears right now, let me take a look. Scoot over to FanDuel for a second. The Bears right now are plus 400 to win the division, but could Max Crosby be coming their way? They're moving space like crazy. What do they got up their sleeve? What do they have up their sleeve is certainly a question. KFT, fair point about about the Vikings needing to get Caleb Banks. Maybe Caleb Banks' value just went up. I was really interested, by the way, in where Daniel Jeremiah, who for my money is just the best at this, where Daniel Jeremiah was going to put Caleb Banks after his combine, because I saw a lot of people kind of freaking out about it. Like, man, he was really great and look how big he is and he moved well. And he didn't even have him in the top 30 prospects. I think he was maybe 35th. So there's some disagreement there when it comes to the defensive tackles. I personally don't love the defensive tackle class very much. I think if a guy is 6'6" and 327 and doesn't have great production, I've got a lot of questions. And I know Danielle Hunter just made another 40 mil, but if the last example we could think of is Danielle Hunter, it's pretty rough. And Peter Woods, same kind of deal. Man, the guy looks like kind of a freak, but he didn't do stuff at the combine and his production wasn't that great. And he also didn't rank that high from Daniel Jeremiah. So I'm a little more on the cornerback train at the moment for their top pick, but long way to go. Dan says if the Vikings sign Murray, win 12 plus games and bounce in the first round, is KOC fired? No. I don't think so. I mean, maybe if you lost by 60, I don't think so. No, I don't think so at all. I think that if they won 12 games with Kyler Murray and won the division, he'd be talking about maybe another Coach of the Year award for Kevin O'Connell. With his job situation, it comes up a lot, and it's right that it comes up a lot because the NFL is brutal with this. And I'm going to stand on the ground that it's better to have a good coach that work your way through this. And there may come a day that you get to a point and you go, I'll just toss it out there of the Tony Dungy to John Gruden type of thing. It's an old example, but it's one that has been used many times as a justification for moving on from a good coach to try to get a great coach. Now, you got to be sure who the heck you're hiring. If you're Cleveland and you fire Kevin Stefanski and then you bring in Todd Monken, it's like, okay, I don't see where this helps you. Not that I think that Stefanski was amazing there, but when they had good teams, he won Coach of the Year. So the point just being, like, they had a good coach and yeah, it got really toxic and catastrophic and horrific. So they had to fire him. But if you're still competing every single year, then you really got to be sure that's the moment to move from one coach to another. If you're able to take 3 different quarterbacks to double-digit wins, I'm probably just not moving on from that coach unless I really have to. If you're able to take 3 different quarterbacks to double-digit wins, because that to me is a signal that if you ever do get that guy, it could be really good. They just thought that it was going to be JJ McCarthy. KOC is going to change his offense for Kyler when he wouldn't fit at all for JJ McCarthy. Now, see, that's just a myth. I mean, that's just a myth. The idea that he didn't change it for JJ McCarthy is total myth. It's just not true. I mean, even the reports that are not adding up, right, with that. If it's, well, they changed the offense so he wouldn't have to throw over the middle so much, but apparently he didn't change the offense. It's very easy to see it on paper that when he came back from his injury, it was a lot more run first. And here's what really is weird about this take is when people want more short passing. Why wasn't there more of a quick game? Why isn't there more short passing? But then when we look at the actual performance, when JJ McCarthy threw the ball quickly, it was awful. He was basically the worst quick game quarterback in the entire NFL. KOC sets up the offense for him to work in the intermediate areas where he actually had some success. And then he didn't change it. They improved their run EPA from 28th into the top 15 last year. They actually had more run EPA per carry than the Seattle Seahawks this year, who got, touted as this great run game, but they ran the ball much more on early downs and even on second down than they had ever done before around JJ McCarthy. And also Kyler Murray, man, JJ McCarthy, I mean, he can't carry Kyler Murray's pads, dude. Like when you look at the performance from those two quarterbacks, it's like equating Josh Dobbs to Kyler Murray. They have nothing to do with each other. Kyler Murray has been a top 10 quarterback for an entire season in the league before, and has most recently, going into this year, been ranked by NFL executives as the 15th best quarterback. He's one of the most dynamic players in the league at that position. over his history. That doesn't mean he's perfect. It doesn't mean he's flawless. It doesn't mean I need to marry him, but it does mean that that's his level of talent. He's the number 1 overall pick. These things are not alike. They are not alike at all. We're talking about a guy who came into the league, and by his second year, he's one of the most electric players in the league. He's a Pro Bowl caliber player, real Pro Bowl caliber player, whereas McCarthy was one of the bottom 5 quarterbacks in the NFL in every metric for last year. These are not comparable things. Kyler Murray is incredibly accurate. He is one of the best in the NFL at avoiding bad throws and on target throws. He's one of the best in the NFL in completion percentage. Between 2020 and 2024, 6th best in completion percentage in the NFL. These things are not alike. So can you adapt your offense around someone who's this dynamic and this skilled? I think that's a lot easier to do than someone who can't hit wide open wide receivers and whose completion percentage above expected was so far below expected that it was one of the lowest in the entire league last year. So these are just very different conversations. If you're trying to use proof that he can't adapt his offenses, Josh Dobbs and JJ McCarthy, which he did, and we've been over this, and I've presented you with all the evidence for it, but you keep coming to every live stream and say it, which is confusing to me. I don't see where these two things connect. It is 100% a question of, if you get Kyler Murray, how are you going to design your offense? Are you going to pare things down? Are you going to have him under center? Are you going to have him, although you guys won't be shocked, the throwing over the middle thing is overstated. It's overstated. I wrote it in my article today that Kyler Murray in 2024 threw over the middle, past the line of scrimmage. So I just did line of scrimmage, past the line of scrimmage, over the middle on 33% of his passes. Sam Darnold in 2024 was 35% of his passes. So it's even that. It's like I remember I was calling him McCarthy because a lot of people had built up this thing in their mind that they thought it was just going to be this flawless quarterback right out of the box. I guess I'm going to have to call it, Myth Murray, because people have created this mythological Kyler Murray that doesn't actually exist, that is this terrible little quarterback who cannot throw the ball anywhere and needs Kevin O'Connell to, install Edina High School's offense in order for him to work. It's really not reality. He's an NFL quarterback who will require some adjustments, but they're not going to the wing T here with Kyler Murray. All right. Jams Tube says Kyler will force KOC to change his offense. He will have to adapt to the things Kyler does well. Is that not true for Kirk Cousins? We're going to have to do this again, aren't we? Where I pull up the screen grab or the screen share and show you on PFF where Kirk Cousins, how about this? 2023 Kirk Cousins. I don't have to do it anymore because I've memorized these stats. Kirk Cousins in 2023 threw the ball more than 20 yards in the air on 8% of his passes. 8. Kyler Murray in 2024 threw it over 20 yards on 10% of his passes. Basically the same. It's really all the stuff that gets thrown out there. It's just not, yes, there's an adjustment. For sure there is. With any player there is. With JJ, with Darnold, it was a different offense with Darnold than it was with Cousins. Any player, it's going to be the case. And if he can't do it with someone of this talent, then maybe we are talking about hot seats and job changes and so forth if they bring in Kyler Murray. But I think when you actually look at this under a microscope, it's not quite what people think it is. I swear it sounds like you're having to turn this offense into, I don't even know. Like, is he, what did the Dolphins ran the Wildcat? They got to do the Wildcat with Kyler Murray, according to what it ends up sounding like. You have to move the pocket with Kyler sometimes. You certainly have to deal with the ups and downs of him bailing out on plays. I'm going to get into this very shortly with Alex Clancy, actually. This is a pretty good lead into Alex, because he, who covered the Arizona Cardinals for the last, 10 years or something, breaks all of this down in our interview. So I'll just let him get to it momentarily. But 100% it's real that you have to make a change. It's just that the extreme that people are talking about, I think, is not correct. Let's see. Lenny says McCarthy's first 10 games were better than Josh Allen's and Darnold's first 10 games. Lenny, let's be serious. Let's just be serious on the show. Let's just try to be serious. First of all, Josh Allen is one of the biggest freaks of all time. You're also tossing out that Josh Allen is the best or second best running quarterback of all time. Top 5. Let's call it top 5. Let's say Randall Cunningham, Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton, Josh Allen. So when you just Google passer rating, yes, you're right. It was a struggle. But that was also in Josh Allen's rookie year. It was not in Josh Allen's second year, where by the end of his second year, he had thrown 1,800 passes, 1,800 passes since college. And he had thrown probably 700 passes in the NFL by his second year. J.J. McCarthy's thrown 243. And again, we're talking about Allen, who is the most gifted and most prolific runner in the NFL other than Lamar Jackson in this entire era. That is not remotely true of J.J. McCarthy, who had a couple of nice runs. But it's a big difference when a 6'6", 250-pound guy who could throw the ball 80 yards in the air and jump over Anthony Barr on a totally rebuilding team, by the way. That is never brought up when people try for these comps that are just such sad reaches, is the Jets and Sam Darnold. He was 20 and played for a terrible team that had tanked to get him. And Josh Allen came into a team that was, when they played the Vikings in 2018, remember that team was blown out by like 40 points the week before? Remember that they were like 20-point underdogs going into that game? That's what kind of team they had when Josh Allen got there. When did he take his big step? Is when he got a real wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. None of this sounds similar. None of this sounds similar at all. Scoldger's Rise says, when did KOC start using big personnel? I mean, that was in the second half of the season. They started using, that's part of the adjustment. KOC talked about it at the podium. It was a question that I asked about using the big personnel more often with J.J. McCarthy. Kerpluppy says Garrett Bradbury to the Bears, and here we are with Brandel. Yeah, I mean, Brandel is probably a better pass protector than Garrett Bradbury, but if you were redoing last offseason, letting Garrett Bradbury go was not one of the things that you would do. And the problem with the evaluation of last offseason is that range of outcomes, every single thing that's gone wrong was in the range of outcomes. In the range of outcomes, do Hargrave and Allen not look like they did 3 years ago? Yeah. In the range of outcomes, would it have been a bad idea to move on from Garrett Bradbury and Harrison Phillips, who you had under contract right on your team, and you just let them go for very little in terms of return? In fact, I think Bradbury was just released, right? And Phillips was traded for a late round draft pick. Those guys would have been pretty valuable for your team, and you just moved on from them. There's a lot that they did last offseason that you could first guess was very risky. There was another outcome where all this worked out and Ryan Kelly was incredible and they win 12 games because he's so good, and Hargrave and Allen get 15 sacks combined or something, but you flip the coin and the coin is weighted toward, I mean, it was 70-30 that these things would probably not work out. The idea from last year that I thought was, well, if half of them do work out decently, if let's say Hargrave fails, but Kelly's great, but almost none of them worked out. So they got snake eyes over and over again. Planet Yevon says, Geno Smith could be another 1998 Randall Cunningham. There will never be another 1998 Randall Cunningham because there will never be another 1998 Randy Moss. But your point is taken, though, that it might be, hey, and if they draft Chris Brazel, the guy who just goes downfield all the time for Tennessee, like, let it rip, man. Just let it rip. Fire it up. See how far you can throw it. Dan, can you explain the cap thing? I was told during the season the Vikings were $15 million under the cap. Did that carry over to new season? I don't know what overthecap.com had them during the season. I know that it was brought up sometimes about how much over the cap they were, but by the end of the year, for whatever reason, however that worked out, It was basically like 45 million is where they settled over. I don't know what it said. I didn't look at it during the regular season. So maybe you're right that it was a different number than it is right now. But going into the offseason, 45 was where they ended up settling on. So that means it's not like they couldn't get there. They knew that they could get there. It was really what type of approach you're going to take to get there. Were you going to take the approach that you're going to restructure every single contract, you're going to move every single dollar, and you're going to spend into the future and sacrifice with void years and all the other levers you could pull? Or are you going to have what I've called it the get right offseason. You could also call it the ethical offseason. And they've decided to have the ethical offseason. So they're going to move enough money to get right with the cap, but they're not going to create every single dollar they possibly can. You could still spend and you could still get free agents. You just can't go on some sort of crazy spending spree. But I didn't look at where they were during the middle of the season, because my thought all along was that they were going to just restructure everything that moved. Scolders rise, Crosby or Hendrickson to the Bears. I assume you're talking about. It feels like it. Yep. It feels like they're moving their cap space around to land one of those two guys. And that is pretty scary. They're both really, really good players. I think Crosby is better than Hendrickson and is more scary. If they get him, that's somebody who can have a similar effect to Micah Parsons. I put Max Crosby in that next level 5 or 6 best guys in the entire league. I don't quite put Trey Hendrickson there, even though he does get a lot of sacks. I think he's more of like the next wave of that. Enemy Cap, which sounds like where the Vikings are at right now, says, I think we as fans need to forget that we drafted him. I think you're referring to McCarthy, and just think of him as another high drafted quarterback that wasn't good right away. If he comes in and balls out, that's great. If not, oh well. Fair enough. There is this part that I totally understand from Vikings fans, which is that you were sold on this idea that JJ McCarthy was so impressive to Kevin O'Connell. And he said this with his own words. They were so impressive that they're willing to get rid of a 14-win quarterback because that's how good they think this guy is. And last year, even though, yes, if you are a daily listener, watcher, then yes, you remember me questioning this a little bit. But also what I came around to eventually was, well, I mean, there's signal in the fact that they picked him. I remember saying that. Like, there's signal in the fact that they picked him. They must see stuff that we don't know about behind the scenes where they are so sold and so impressed that good to go. Like, they believe he's going to take that, not Patrick Mahomes level, but that kind of take the ball from Alex Smith and go forth, right? That's what we thought. That's what they thought. Clearly they did, because they made the decision. So what happened in 2024 training camp just did not come together in the way that it was expected. But because the bar was set so high and the hype was so much and the team's hype for him was so much, and they take responsibility for that as well, that why wouldn't you get sold on it? Why wouldn't you, if you're watching from afar, believe like, yeah, this is going to work? I thought they'd win 11 games. I thought it was going to work for sure. Like, I didn't think they were going to win the Super Bowl, but I thought they would be in the postseason with that team and him learning on the fly how to play quarterback. And I thought, all right, we'll see how it goes. But when you go through the history of the draft and all the first rounders, it's a coin flip. It's 50-50. And at this moment, it looks like you ended up on the wrong side of it. It's really up to him to change that. And from what Alec Lewis reported, he's working with John Beck, who has done a good job with a lot of quarterbacks, and maybe that will help. And maybe there will be development. And look, for all we know, next year, they could sign Kyler Murray and he gets hurt in week 2. And JJ McCarthy's playing the rest of the season anyway. Like, we have no idea what's really going to happen here. But would it be shocking if a quarterback didn't work out? That's kind of life in the NFL. It happens all the time. Strizzy the Kid, when I try to evaluate JJ, I only include the games once KOC realized the offense wasn't going to work if he didn't run the ball. So you're only including the games where they played bad teams and McCarthy looked a little better. I don't know if we can really do it that way. if you're an NFL coach who's made his bones on his passing game, and you have to strip down your passing game to an elementary type level to where you're not asking the quarterback to do a whole heck of a lot, and you're putting in big personnel and you're running the ball and you're only having him kind of try to throw to open wide receivers. Is that really something? I mean, isn't that the evaluation? Isn't that more important than the results that you had to do that? That's not what Kevin O'Connell wants to do. That's not what you can do over a 17-game season. You can do that. Remember when they tried it with Jake Browning in Cincinnati? When Jake Browning took over in Cincinnati for Joe Burrow the first time, they got away with a couple of games because they threw screens and they ran play actions and they ran the football and everything. And it worked for a little bit until it didn't, because it's Jake Browning. And the same kind of thing with this. Yeah, you can get through a game. Think about who they played down the stretch. Defensive coordinator fired with Washington. Defensive coordinator fired with Dallas. Defensive coordinator fired with New York. And then Green Bay's not even playing their players. And we're saying, oh yeah, that's much better. Like, I don't know. I mean, you have to evaluate it in the context of everything we saw, which was a lot of volatility and an inability to just do the things that Kevin O'Connell's offense has proven to work in the past. That's very hard to say to Kevin O'Connell, why don't you just run that really simple offense that couldn't actually possibly take you anywhere once you started playing real teams, or once other teams got a hold of it, but it got you through a couple games so you could get to a winning record? Just do that. I don't want Kevin O'Connell to change his passing game that much. I want him to adapt it around Kyler Murray or Geno Smith or whoever, but I don't want him to have to try to go to Michigan's college offense, because it will not work. There is a reason why college offenses don't transfer to the NFL, because they're not complex enough. There is a certain baseline where you have to get that complex to get in the door. Kind of goes for any profession, right? You get to, like, yeah, I mean, if you're a musician, and you play in your local band, you might be able to get through songs and sound okay. If you want to go play with Metallica, you better be able to play all the notes. It goes for any profession. And so you can't just sort of cherry pick he's 6-4. I mean, the 6-4 thing is kind of sad. I mean, to lean on 6-4 when he didn't even win the Giants game. Max Brosmer won the Giants game, and they're the Giants. Jay says, are you hosting to start off free agency? Yes, I will be. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And when you said, someone else said, well, he played like a young quarterback. No, not really. When we look at the other he played like a young quarterback who doesn't have a career as a starter. If we look at all the comps to same quarterback rating through 10 games as Christian Ponder, he played like a young quarterback from his draft status who doesn't get more chances. That's what he played like. That's the truth. And that's why they're looking at other quarterbacks. When you guys are coming up with some of these arguments, you're like, do you realize that the team is looking at other starting quarterbacks? Like that's the conclusion. So we're really talking about why is that the conclusion, but the history's not good. The history of quarterbacks who aren't drafted in the top 5 like this, Kurt Hammett is a system guitarist is funny. Yeah. There are weirdos on the internet who think that Kirk Hammett is overrated. And I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you about that. Don't know what you can really say. Skull Shadow says Murray never really had a run game behind him. What can the Vikings do to get one besides looking into Jeremiah Love at number 18? That's a great question. And I had them in my draft sim taking Jadarian Price, who I think would be a good consolation prize if they could get him. They do need improvement there. And I think that what they're looking for is the system to do the job for them, because that's why you bring in Frank Smith. That's one of the reasons that you elevate Keith Carter, is these guys have had success in the past with the running game. And you start with Jordan Mason, who is a good running back and averaged 4.5 yards a carry last year, was fairly successful, probably early in the season. And with Carson Wentz in there, should have been used more often. I would agree with anybody who said that. But if you look at free agency, It's a tough sell. I think Tyler Algier might be the best guy in free agency to look at, but I mean, is there going to be a bidding war for him? There's not many running backs in free agency. It's tough because I think they need more talent in the backfield. And where do you get it? That's going to be exceptional. I think you're right. It's just I don't have a great answer for that if Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker aren't coming here. But you're right that they've never had a good running game with him. JG, how did KOC get it so wrong with JJ's development level? Now that's a fair question right there. What I think is, I'm trying to think of a metaphor for this. How about like if you were an A student and then we'll tie this into Sam Darnold. Let's say you were an A student through November of high school and then you got mono and you missed an entire month and then you showed up and they were like, yeah, SATs are in 3 weeks or whatever. That's not the best, but you know what I'm saying? Like the state tests are in 3 weeks. You're an A student, right? So you were just at home studying and that should be fine. So just go get A's on these tests. The reputation of the first impression of you as a student getting A's is, well, you're smart, get A's. And with JJ McCarthy, the first impression and the reputation that he built in 2024 camp was this guy checks off all the boxes. I said it numerous times. I still believe it. His physical gifts were way, way better than what people said they were. I don't think he's Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but I think that his arm strength was very, very good. And his development in terms of throwing was very impressive. He was getting much more accurate. And you were projecting forward of, okay, well, if we stop it right there and then just pick up, but that's not how it worked. How it worked was there was much more to go. And I also think that the emotional ups and downs of the NFL and what he went through last year, the injury, the child, even just the start to the season, the comeback, it was so much whiplash. I think that's really hard for anybody. So you cannot project. And this I think has been proven out through NFL history. You cannot project how someone's going to play quarterback in the NFL until they're actually out there, actually playing. There is no way to just look at them and in the draft or now I will say, there's clear things in practice that you can see, but even then, I don't think that there's any way that you can figure out what it's really going to look like until someone gets out there. And once he got out there, there was probably a lot of, okay, he's not ready. And that's why there's been a lot of focus on missing out on Daniel Jones and not having the backup situation because they had no fallback. That was another issue as well. They gave themselves no fallback at all when it came to JJ McCarthy. Like if he's not 100% ready, well, too bad. Feline Master P Cisco. Will there be an adjustment if they bring in Murray? Do they play more Call of Duty? Yeah. I see your sarcasm there. But will there be an adjustment? I think that the adjustment is less than what is being stated by a lot of people. And it's really funny when people say that Kyler can't play point guard, but Geno can. Because Geno, to cross sports metaphors, plays like Miguel Sano. He's swinging for the fences every single time, whereas Kyler actually plays much more of the safe. When I gave you all those stats about accurate passes and completion percentage and stuff, some of that's because he plays very safe, because he will not necessarily push it into tighter windows downfield, and he will complete passes underneath and so forth. So I think it's overstated how much they have to adjust, but you do have to deal with the fact that you're not going to talk about someone who's going to play it like Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold would stand tall in the pocket and he would at the very last second torque his body and let that thing rip into a tight window, and it was insane. And how they got rid of him, I still can't quite figure out with an arm like that, but they did, and he won the Super Bowl. But that's very different than with Kyler. If Kyler gets pressure, he's going to scramble. So you have to deal with that part of it and that's probably why they set him up with a lot of quick stuff when he was with Cliff Kingsbury, is if he gets pressure, he's going to scramble. He's going to try to escape and try to make something exceptional happen. And that's where, as Kevin O'Connell, you don't really have control. You just have to pray at that point that he does something amazing. So how can you kind of contain what he's going to do, or how often he's going to get pressured, or how you're going to deal with what your plan is? And my thing would be, you have to build a lot of it off the run and play action and so forth, so you can deal with the pressure and then ask him to make a few special plays a game instead of trying to make a ton, which at times he has during his career. I assume that's James, Jaims, a run game and play action with Kyler. And they've got to get the run game going. I don't have the greatest answers. I mean, there's free agents that are decent that I think could help. I mean, last year, look, Rico Dowdle signed for like $2 million last year, was pretty good for Carolina. Had some huge games. Javonte Williams signed for almost nothing, and he was pretty good. So you can find those guys out there. KFT, Crosby could force a trade. Max Crosby, what would they be willing to take? That's a good question. And there was even, I mean, I saw it bouncing around from a rumor account about Philadelphia trying to get him. That would be wild. It's going to cost a lot. That's where it gets tricky. But if he wants out, I mean, how much can you really push that up, considering you have to take on, I mean, KFT saying that they want 2 firsts and a starter. That's a lot. If Jeremiah Love fell, that would be phenomenal. Neil, in your opinion, could JJ McCarthy still be a franchise quarterback, or has that ship sailed? See, this is the funny thing about the McCarthy. If you try to, and I don't blame anyone for doing this. I mean, you're so invested in a first round quarterback as Vikings fans and as a franchise and everything else. There is a strong hope for maybe it will still work out. And this is a different conversation from, no, I'm going to repackage last year as something that it wasn't. I was at every game. I mean, I saw it right in front of me. It's not just me looking at the data without even if you did, you'd get the right conclusion. I mean, I'm there, right there watching it. So when you tell me, no, it was actually like this, it's like, well, come on, right? I mean, somebody the other day brought up, well, did you ever think that it might have been the drop passes? And I'm like, you know what, man? You know, I did cover every game for the last 10 years, but I didn't think of dropped passes. No, I did think of that. And by adjusted completion percentage, 4 drops, McCarthy was 37th out of 45. So it was slightly better than his completion percentage. The point being that if you try to repackage last year to make it work for you, that doesn't ever come out. Like, well, in the last 4 games but in the last 4, we know this, right? The last 4 games were not something that was indicative even then of a franchise quarterback, because even then there was only 1 game where he really drove the success and the other ones were just survive. So even then, as they had already dumbed down the offense, as they were playing some of the worst teams, you're still just getting 160-yard type performances to win. These are backup caliber type of things. What happened last year? So we can't gaslight on last year and be like, no, it was actually good. You just didn't realize it. Oh, okay, thanks. It's not that. It's, if you're looking forward, like, let me help you with the JJ take if you want it. If you want to buy into JJ McCarthy, I think it's a very, very straightforward path to eventually still being a franchise quarterback, either here or anywhere else. And that path is this, that JJ McCarthy embraces anything that comes his way this year, that he does not sit there and think it's not fair, the world's against me, I got screwed, because that won't get you anywhere. I've seen that fail pretty hard in the NFL for backup quarterbacks before, and you guys could probably name them. But there have been plenty of quarterbacks in the league who think that they are the victim, that they're being wronged, that they want out, and it's not right what's happening to me and everything else. But the NFL doesn't wait for you to figure it all out and give you forever. So what you have to do in that situation is you have to put your head down, take on any single role. And I'm going to give you the funniest possible example of a guy who's done this. Laquan Treadwell is in his 11th year in the National Football League because he just eventually recognized that he wasn't going to be Stephon Diggs. So he just played special teams and was a wide receiver 4 for teams, and he stayed in the league. And if JJ McCarthy were to accept where he was, and this is what Sam Darnold did with the San Francisco 49ers, accept this is my job and I'm getting paid for it. And I'm going to give them every single thing I have. And I'm going to work after every single practice with Josh McCown and whoever else. And I'm going to just put my whole heart and soul into helping Kyler Murray or Geno Smith or Kirk Cousins or whoever win games from that quarterback room. And I'm going to take every single practice as if it's the most important thing, as if my whole career hinges on it and how much I can learn that day, how much I can get better that day. And I'm going to show these coaches that I belong back on the field at some point. And you know what? Based on how often quarterbacks get hurt, he'll probably get in the game if he's a backup quarterback. If he takes that approach, then he has every bit of the arm strength. He has every bit of the mobility. He has every bit of the confidence, the moxie when he's playing well, and the belief and the edge to his game. And I think it's got to get smoothed out for sure. And he's got to learn from those things. And he's got to listen to his coaches. You can do it. He's so young at this point that it can absolutely happen. There is a world where Murray plays or Geno plays and you are 5-7 and it's time to just go back to McCarthy and he's ready to go. And this is Malik Willis. This is why no matter what happens to Malik Willis, I love the fact that he did what he's done. Malik Willis was a guy who was left for dead. His franchise just said, we don't care about you. We're going to give you away to Green Bay for nothing. And rather than be entitled or pout or say, oh, the NFL wronged me and I'll never get my chance, that guy was ready to go. Absolutely ready to go when he got called upon and is now going to earn a starting chance. So if Malik Willis's career was not over after a bad start and Sam Darnold's career wasn't over after a bad start with 2 franchises, and Baker Mayfield's career wasn't over after going to multiple franchises and having to be a backup, and Geno Smith's career wasn't over after being a backup for the Giants and then Seattle, then JJ McCarthy's doesn't have to be either. Even Marcus Mariota got another chance to start. He's Mariota's kind of like JJ, like a little bit of, doesn't quite have the consistency and accuracy, and was more athlete than he was quarterback early on. Struggled with accuracy, struggled with consistency, and even he got another chance to start for the Falcons for a season. It's a long lifespan for a quarterback in the NFL if you embrace all those things that I talked about. But that's what has to happen here. And I will say it all offseason, no matter what happens at quarterback. It is very likely in my mind that the best thing for JJ McCarthy is this next season not playing 15 games or whatever, not being the starter. Because if he gets another chance to do that, now if he wins the job against Geno Smith, then okay, I'm a different tune. But if they sign Geno and he tore his ACL on the 3rd day of training camp, McCarthy comes out and struggles mightily in the first couple games and they bench him again for who the hell knows who. I don't know how, it's hard to come back from that. So is it possible he could still be this team's quarterback? It is. Is it possible that he could still, that it could work out somewhere else? It is. It's not over just because it started out like the way that it has. But also from the franchise's perspective, you can't look at last year and say, oh, we're good. We're just going to roll that out. Not if you have a chance to get a top 15 quarterback in Kyler Murray for $1 million. BCR102, in your mind, what's the quarterback philosophy with this organization? Has it changed year to year? Some stability would be nice. Well, I think that they had it. I think they had the exact right idea. And that idea was to have Kirk Cousins get them to a certain level and then move on at the right time from Cousins, not pay him, and draft a quarterback in 2024. It's the right idea. And it worked for the Denver Broncos. They drafted Bo Nix. They built up their roster. They spent money. They kept their guys. They re-signed guys. They have a good coach. And they were one ankle away from being in the Super Bowl, I believe, the Denver Broncos. It's worked many times. The problem is when it doesn't work, then you're left looking around going, what do we do now? And that goes for any franchise. I mean, think about New England and what after Mac Jones. They had Cam Newton coming in there at one point. Like, they're just looking around. I don't even know if the timeline's right on that, but that might have been before that. But I mean, they're bringing it. They didn't know what they were going to do once Mac Jones struggled, and the answer ended up being tanking and getting Drake May. Yet you kind of have to bridge yourself. That's why they call it a bridge. You have to bridge yourself to the next quarterback or hope. So Sam Darnold, if Seattle was being super, super honest, if John Schneider was being super, super honest, he would probably say that he might have seen Sam Darnold as a possible bridge to let's compete with this team and then maybe we draft our next quarterback at some point. It just turned out that Sam Darnold is actually awesome and they won the Super Bowl. But even Tampa Bay, go back to when Tampa Bay signs Baker Mayfield. They are talking about him competing with Kyle Trask. That's what they're talking about there. So you have to take a shot. Jared Goff, most people thought that they were going to draft somebody else. You have to take a shot at your bridge quarterback working out, and that would be your Kyler Murray or Geno Smith, and then reassess and see where you're at. If it goes bust, then you're talking about drafting fairly high. Skull Shadow, how much will Kenneth Walker demand? Algier would be a good consolation prize. Got to draft a running back too. Yeah, Algier, I don't think is going to get a lot of money. Teams either spend a lot on one or two guys or nothing is the way that the market has often worked out. There was a thought a couple years ago. Oh yeah, I mean, we're going to see all sorts of big spending on running backs. Never happened. Najee Harris got almost no money. J.K. Dobbins didn't get much. I forget all the running backs from last year, but none of them got any money. Kenneth Gainwell is also still in this conversation. I think he's a pretty decent player as someone to be part of a duo, but it's not going to be wildly better than what they had with Aaron Jones and Mason. What they need is another guy with some jets in his feet. That's what I think that they need. I mean, you would have liked that to have been, they took a shot at that with Ty Chandler. It just never worked out with Chandler other than in a couple of bursts, but drafting one within the first, whatever number of picks that they end up with at the latest third round, I think is pretty wise, even in a draft that is not being thought of highly from the running back position. Chris says the Bills were out on Josh Allen, then kept playing him. Now, no, they weren't. You know where I'm from, right? The Buffalo Bills were never out on Josh Allen. Not ever. Not at any point. Josh Allen, look, we just don't need to do Josh Allen. I'm giving you better comps. I'm giving you Ryan Tannehill. If you want to use Ryan Tannehill, I think that's a good one. I think that's a very good one. Josh Allen, by his second season, was one play away from beating the Houston Texans in the playoffs. They were never out on Josh Allen. In fact, I will tell you this. In 2018, when the Bills played at US Bank Stadium, because I know people with the Bills organization, a acquaintance of mine with the team, I asked him, what do you think of this guy? What do you think of Josh Allen? I said, I'm a little skeptical. And he told me, this is 2018 before the game, before Josh Allen jumped over Anthony Barr. He said, everyone's buying it. He said, if you saw his work ethic, if you saw his intelligence, then you'd know. I was like, oh, okay. And I continued to question Josh Allen therefore until it clicked in with him as a thrower. But he was in the playoffs as a prolific runner and a wow passer, still an inconsistent wow passer in 2019, his second season, where again, he got so much more experience. JJ McCarthy just finished up his second season. You could call him a rookie all you want, but he finished up his second season in the NFL. One of them completely lost, and another one he played like, not like a rookie, like a bad rookie. He played like a bad rookie, not just a regular rookie. When you look at how the rookies played last year, Tyler Shuck, who I know is older than him, but Tyler Shuck on a much worse team played way better. Bo Nix, when he came in, played way better. And I know, again, yeah, he's older, so he needs time. And that's why I said it's not over. But if you try to rewrite and make these bizarre comparisons for It's just, it doesn't click. It doesn't work. Christopher says, I want Kyler. Thank you to the podcasts. You're welcome. You're welcome. I can finally hear someone talk about my team that isn't a JJ stan that bashes KOC all day. The thing about evaluating Kevin O'Connell is we need to keep our heads. And that's really one of the things about the podcast is that this show, because my history is as a journalist and not as like a take artist, is really to look at the full picture, right? So when you say, well, how do you feel about JJ McCarthy? Well, last year was last year and the facts are the facts. And I'm going to look at the facts and say, not good. And that's why they're looking for a different quarterback. But I'm also going to say, certainly there's a world where this could work out. It just, these steps have to be taken. Where's the hot take? Well, there isn't one. And with Kyler Murray, well, I have been in favor this entire time, as many of you have pointed out, of Kyler Murray. That's because I think it's the best of all the options. It's not that I'm going in with tiny little number one glasses and saying Kyler Murray's the best quarterback in the NFL and they'll win a Super Bowl with him. It's more of just when I evaluate all the other options, I like this one the best. And part of it is that I don't think a lot of the things hold up in court that are criticism of Kyler Murray. I think there's truth to all of them, but I don't think that they're as extreme as people say. So yeah, I mean, there are different approaches to doing this, but that I think is different from this show is I'm not standing on a hill to die on. It's let's look at all the facts and evidence that we have and see what we come up with, which includes, and I gotta get to this. You guys have been great, by the way, with all the questions. So I haven't gotten to it. This interview with Alex Clancy from Lockdown, because it's really, really, really insightful about Kyler Murray. So I should get to that, but I don't want to leave people out with the questions. Oh, I also wanted to say, well, let me add this. The FanDuel question of the day is, what team scares you in the NFC? And I'll go through those. The favorites again. In the NFC North is the Detroit. In the NFC South is Tampa Bay at plus 155. Plus 130, Seattle is the favorite in the West. And in the East is the Philadelphia Eagles at plus 105. What team scares you that could make such a big move or a difference-making move that you would be like, uh-oh? And the Bears, I think, are the best answer that you folks have given so far. I did want to mention, though, that my pleading for us to get to 15,000 subscribers has worked. So thank you. I guess I need to beg more often. Please, people, subscribe to the channel. But 15,000 is a pretty significant milestone. And it's very inspiring to me. And I can't tell you guys how much I enjoy the back and forth and the questions and the comments and all of your thoughts. Even if sometimes I disagree with you or maybe take it farther in my response than you'd like. A lot of you will keep swinging, which I think is great, and don't take it personally so much, you know, if I don't see things the same way as you do, because I really love our back and forth every night. And I can't thank you guys enough for getting to that 15,000 subscriber milestone. It means a lot to me. And I have to also shout out Jonathan Harrison, the producer of this show, who puts in so much effort behind the scenes to make sure that we've been able to get there. That, you know, I don't give him enough credit on the show, but puts in so much work to be able to, you know, help this thing happen. So thank you very much for all of that. Wait. Whoa. Are you guys serious? Did this just happen? Are you guys serious? Are you messing with me? Max Crosby traded to the Baltimore Ravens? Wow. Well, I guess you don't have to be that scared of we haven't even reached free agency yet, guys. This is already going down. Let's see what the price is. According to Adam Schefter, they have agreed to send Max Crosby to the Ravens for 2 first-round draft picks, 2026 and 2027. Of course, it can't be finalized until next week, but Max Crosby will be a Baltimore Raven. So I guess you could take your deep breath that it was not the Bears or the Eagles or any NFC team, and it won't be shifting the FanDuel odds. Now, will it? It will continue to be where it is rather than moving, because he's an odds moving player. Max Crosby, I truly believe that he is one of the 5 best pass rushers in the entire NFL. And this is also, they're going to afford Max Crosby and Lamar Jackson. So they have to be doing a new Lamar Jackson deal. I did see Lamar put something out there earlier. There was an emoji and then he tried to play it off, but I guess he was serious that this was going down. But how are they going to afford Lamar Jackson and whatever contract they're going to do along with now Max Crosby in his contract? But Jesse Minter with the Ravens, they are not going away, and they are clearly serious about getting back to true Super Bowl contention, which I have no doubt this is going to put them right up to the top. I actually wonder if FanDuel has already updated its odds for the Baltimore Ravens. They were already pretty high. The Ravens were plus 155. Scroll that up a little bit more so you can see it. Plus 155, or minus 155, sorry, to win the AFC North on FanDuel. I'm guessing that's going to change by quite a bit. And you're right. I mean, that domino right there, Aram, probably did need to fall. So now the other teams that are looking for that pass rusher that maybe thought they were in will now look to Jonathan Grenard. So earlier, if you recall, in my offseason simulation, I included a move where I traded Jonathan Grenard for a second and third, and we were kind of debating whether that was too much. If Max Crosby's going for 2 firsts with his contract, I think that you could get a second and third for Jonathan Grenard. He certainly is not at the same level as Max Crosby, but can you get into that ballpark? I mean, there are people who are desperate for pass rush in the NFL. Teams that are desperate, clearly. You're right about Linderbaum. Yep, Linderbaum is going to hit the market for sure. They're not re-signing him now. Jeff says, what's the option at center now? Draft one. Make sure they weigh at least 320 because they'll play the Eagles. Yeah. I think the best option at center, and the one that they will do, is they will play Blake Brandel there and they'll draft one. That Brandel's going to start as the center, and they will take Jake Slaughter or Sam Hecht or Connor Lew or Brian Parker in maybe the 3rd round, whoever's there. That's my guess, because I don't see them being able to move enough money to get Tyler Linderbaum. If they do, wow, that would be quite the deke out, wouldn't it? Telling us, and you never know, right? They don't have to tell us the truth. Telling us, yeah, we're going to manage our money really well, and then going out and getting one of the best free agents. I don't think that's going to happen. It could, though, I suppose. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's what it's going to be. Wow, just a tectonic movement here already. Aaron, percentage chance that Grenard gets moved. I'm going to put it at coin flip. That's such a cop-out. I don't like doing coin flip. I like to push the needle one way or another, but I mean, we've seen that. See, this is the thing. Like, do they have a different mentality now? Because we have seen them kind of cave before. Remember, Danielle Hunter was on the trading block 4 years in a row or something with his contract situation. And then Hunter always got it worked out with the Vikings. Is that what's going to happen with Grenard? I tend to think no, because of the way that Dallas Turner got, the way he played when he was in Grenard's position. So maybe I should lean it like 60-40 that he does get traded. After this, yeah, let's go 60-40 that he does get traded, because he is very good. But if this is the going price, can you get a back end of the 1st round draft pick? Like, Buffalo just made this big move for DJ Moore, so maybe they're out of this. But would a team that's at the back end of the 1st round that needs pass rush, would they give you that 1st round draft pick? Possibly. Steven says, Brandel did an okay job, but Brandel is a 6th man off the bench. Totally agree. When you look at the other options, though, it's just so hard to find who else off the free agent bin, who else in the draft, who else is going to perform better than him that is going to learn the offense like this quickly. So, Jack says, doesn't JG want his contract redone? Yeah, that seems to be central to the issue, is that Grenard wants a new contract, and I don't think that they can give it to him. Now, I think Schefter did say that the Vikings are comfortable with his current numbers, which may be kind of a too bad type of thing from them. But if the right deal comes along, they have to consider doing it, because most of the league should be calling the Vikings about Jonathan Grenard. He's very, very good. But if you give me the right price, Luke Fortner was my original idea. And I don't know about Henrim, if they could make a trade for a center. Teams, if they have offensive line depth, are going to keep it. They're not getting rid of their offensive line depth. It's not like if you have two good tight ends or something, you're willing to trade one, although that's not even true now. But this offensive line depth, there's a chart out there the other day of the percentage of time that offenses played all five of their starters together, or their most used combination. And most of the league, it's not even 50%. So I don't think teams are going to give those guys away. I like the idea of Fortner, but what's he going to get? Is he going to get $8, $9, $10 million a year? I don't think they want to pay that. And what's really the gap between him and Blake Brandel? Is that worth that much? Because they've got Brandel under contract at a very reasonable deal. So though I like the idea of Fortner, I don't think he's that different from Blake Brandel. Anyway, well, great stuff, guys. And now I guess you could give different answers to that FanDuel question of the day about, it wasn't really specifically about Max Crosby. It was just like, who could make a move that would scare you? And that is now off the table. So, Steven, look, McGovern is a good option too. And Kobe, I think Cade Mays, like those guys are all options. My question is, how much do they cost and there's a lot of, look at Will Fries and Aaron Banks last year. When you have a lot of teams and not a lot of available guys, they get overpaid. So if you had to give Connor McGovern $10 million, I just don't see how they can do it. They got to be looking much more in the bargain bin. Maybe Mays, maybe you bring in someone to compete with Brandel as a guy who's been a backup, but them just going out and getting a starter seems like it's unrealistic with the amount of money they want to spend this offseason. BM, the Ravens must think they're an edge rusher away. Well, look, I mean, you're always in win now mode if you have Lamar Jackson. It's like having John Elway or Dan Marino or Joe Montana or something. Like, it's that level of quarterback. You got that, you're always trying to win. Buffalo never rebuilds. Baltimore never rebuilds. They just keep swinging every offseason. Jeff says, so let me get this straight. They're going into free agency and draft with Brzezinski as the interim GM, then hire one. Crazy. It sounds like a joint effort with KOC Flores and Brzezinski. Yes. Well, it would have been very hard to hire one deep into the offseason because they fired Kwesi so late that how would you do that? How would you hire someone in February to come in and take over your entire operation rather than someone who knows the franchise inside and out? And I also think that Brzezinski might end up just being the GM, and that's what they wanted all along, but they preferred a test case here. That's possible too. Jack, so the trade partner would probably have to do his contract. Yeah, that might be a holdup. In terms of the price, that definitely might be a holdup. MJ, any thoughts or speculation on the new GM? I mean, my speculation would be that Brzezinski is going to be the GM. That's not informed in any way. It's just, boy, he's acting a lot like a GM here. And I think at least their approach so far is favorable to taking long and short term. I mean, short term, you have to get cap compliant, but it looks like they want to potentially stock some draft capital. It doesn't look like they want to be big spenders just to try to win now. And if they do get Kyler Murray, they'll have spent all of $1 American million on him, which is also favorable, not being locked into the quarterback position. So that's the only speculation I have right now until we start getting any other names that are interviewing for that job. All right. Great stuff, guys, this evening. Is there anything, Man says, is there anything unfavorable about Brzezinski? Not that I know of. I've talked to people over many years about Rob Brzezinski, not like, what do you think of him? Not like that, but just, hey, like people from other teams that I will bump into that I know who I've met along the years will be like, oh, hey, do you know Rob Brzezinski? And I have a good relationship with him. Or agents will have told me, multiple agents have told me that he is not like a pushover, but he is a very professional person to deal with. His reputation is very, very high in the league, very, very high. And he has the trust of ownership. What I would like is about Rob Brzezinski as the GM is the trust of ownership. I want one person being the one that's answering to them and giving them the straight, this is what's best for the franchise, not this is what's best for my reputation with them or save my job, because they already think the world of him. That's why I would like it the most, is that he has the most credibility with the ownership to say, I like this move, I don't like this move. And I think he's in the best position to evaluate KOC rather than someone coming in new and then maybe wanting their own coach. So there's some good stuff there. I do not think that they will try to get Diggs back. Diggs now carries around a lot of baggage. He's a great wide receiver, but he now carries around a little too much baggage for me, I think. If your reason for maybe getting rid of Addison is baggage, then Diggs has it in spades. Okay, well, I want to get you guys this interview because it's really good. Alex Clancy from Locked On. We spent a half an hour breaking down all the Kyler Murray stuff. And spoiler, he doesn't just tell me that Kyler Murray's the best ever and I should, tattoo the number 1 on my eyelids or something. There's a very even-handed breakdown of Kyler Murray and what it would look like and require for success with the Minnesota Vikings. So let me bring you that conversation. And also, I had only planned to maybe chat for like an hour, which kind of happens all the time that we go much longer than that. But I also had a good discussion with Mike Rand about his feeling on where the Vikings stand. So I'm going to play you those 2 interviews. I'm going to watch my wife on TV. She's doing Big Ten basketball. And if something else breaks while these interviews are going on, then I'll jump in. If the Vikings do something crazy or whatever, I would have thought this was going to be a slow week. And my friends, it has not been a slow week. But thank you again for getting the show over 15,000 subscribers. Really appreciate that. And we'll talk to you all again. Football, of course. Now, enjoy this conversation with Alex Clancy of Locked On. All right, we welcome into the show from Locked On AZ Cards, covers the Arizona Cardinals, Alex Clancy, who, bless your heart for covering the Arizona Cardinals. And you've been doing it a long time, which means that you got some grit and some toughness from a franchise that never can kind of get there. But I need some insight on Kyler Murray. So what's going on, my man? How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, dude. Yeah. So Kyler, I've been on with you a handful of times, and I was always a Kyler Murray guy. Always from 2019 all the way through. I thought Cliff Kingsbury gave him he had a raw deal with Cliff Kingsbury. Didn't really get the tutor and mentorship that young quarterbacks deserve in this league, especially someone with a unique skill set that Kyler Murray has. Until week 5 of last season, when I saw the offense pop when he went down and Jacoby Brissett was able to, get Michael Wilson a second contract and make Trey McBride the number 1 tight end in fantasy football for those that care about that. It switched. But Kyler Murray is still significantly better than any average quarterback in this league. So that's where the double-edged sword is with him with the Cardinals, and I think it was just time.
All right, here's a good way we could approach this is narrative true or not about Kyler Murray, because what I've spent the last probably 3 weeks or more doing is really investigating these. Are these true or not that, Vikings fans might have trepidation or what people say about him? Let's just start with the part that I don't know anything about, which is Kyler Murray, the dude. Seems like a lot of people don't know a lot about Kyler Murray, the dude, even people who are in Arizona and have covered him for a long time. Why is that such a mystery when it comes to his personality?
So I think that you have to directly correlate it to what we deem as cool or weird at this time in our existence. If you're quiet, you're a weirdo or you're dumb. That's what people think. It's like right away, it's like just because he's not long-winded and not Ray Lewis in press conferences, like he's not a good leader or he's not this or not that. He's very quiet. Hasn't got a DUI out in Scottsdale at 4:00 in the morning. So that's not, it's like a rite of passage here in Arizona, like for professional athletes, but he's been at that, under that umbrella, he's been perfect. Like quite literally, he's been perfect. Now, when you talk about leadership, when you talk about being demonstrative and pouting on the sidelines, every quarterback does that in some form or fashion. But when you don't talk, there's no bounce back on this is what he said in the press conference. This is what he said here. He answered questions that he had to answer, and he went on and played football. Like any savant didn't lose a high school football game, won the Heisman. He was always able to walk on the field and be the best player. Obviously, but like walking, and then when the NFL hit, it's like you don't have that cocoon, you don't have that Andy Reid or Matt LaFleur, even Kevin O'Connell to help him. He had to learn on his own, and it didn't look great early, and I think people just held on to that more than they needed to. I think he's a stellar individual.
I mean, it's funny because like not looking great early is his second and third seasons are Pro Bowl caliber of what we used to think was the Pro Bowl, not like the most IG followers being elected to the Pro Bowl. But I mean, Pro Bowl caliber type of seasons that were imperfect and were up and down, which I think is the nature of a player like Kyler Murray. And everybody knows that. And also there's a lot of quarterbacks that are like that, but especially a scrambler, an undersized guy that when he escapes pressure and it works, it's brilliant. When it doesn't work, it's a disaster. But I think that there is a question of, well, how, if he comes to Minnesota, is he going to gel with Kevin O'Connell and with Kevin O'Connell's offense? And it's very interesting, though, when you look at the comparison of the coaches, where you have a guy who was coach of the year, a guy who in 2024 won 14 games with Sam Darnold, whereas Cliff Kingsbury, it always seemed like it started out well and then it drifted off. And then I thought that there was a shift in the narrative with Kyler when Jonathan Gannon got there, because he seemed to really embrace Kyler, and that relationship appeared to be good between him, Drew Petzing, and Jonathan Gannon. Was that kind of what you saw?
Yeah. I mean, it was initially when Monty Ossenfort's introductory press conference, he said, we came here for Kyler. Jonathan Gannon said the same thing. He said, very rarely does a team in rebuild have their franchise quarterback, because he had just torn his ACL. And he came back. Yeah, like the problem was the offense. They were trying to make Kyler Murray a pocket passer, and it morphed into that. And no, that's not, he's 5'10", maybe. Okay. So you got the Doug Flutie, you got the Drew Brees who has moon balls, Russell Wilson. Like, Kyler Murray is one of the most efficient quarterbacks in football, but the depth of target is very short, and it has become very short. So the offense lended more towards throwing the ball down the field, running the ball, play action, throwing the ball down the field. And I think that's where they bashed heads. But this was a breakup where Dane Cook had this old joke where it's like, why don't people who just sit on the couch, look at each other, be like, this is over, isn't it? And you just high five and go, that's what this is. There's no animosity. There's no toxicity. I don't care what people say. Like, they thought it was going to work. And everything going into this past season, even in Minnesota, you heard the Cardinals were like, they've done everything right this offseason. They drafted well. They brought in Josh Sweat. This is supposed to be the year. And then Kyler Murray got hurt, and the rest was history.
I want to focus on 2024 though, because the data is kind of interesting, where he played under center way more in terms of pass attempts than he ever had before. And there's a higher percentage of play action than there ever was before. And Petzing and his career kind of came from Kevin Stefanski and Gary Kubiak and that time here in Minnesota, coincidentally enough. And I know that this is what Kevin O'Connell wants his quarterbacks to be able to do, is be under center, run play action, bootleg out, and things like that. And then there's the discussion about whether he could throw to the middle of the field, which when I look at the numbers and I compare how much Sam Darnold threw to the middle of the field versus Kyler Murray, it's like a 2% difference, but it wasn't as much as Kirk. And I don't think it's exactly how Kevin O'Connell wants to do it. So what is, from your watching many, many football games of Kyler Murray, what is the right balance of trying to get him to play sort of traditional quarterback stuff that you need to do while also maximizing the mobility, the ability to make plays on the move, and dealing with the height issue?
Yeah, I had no idea about that with Sam Darnold. That makes me think that this is a perfect fit then. If that's the offense without Kyler, like the depth of target thing is, so the out routes, a lot of them are timing. A lot of them are 10, 15-yard outs where Kyler can put it on a dime at the sideline. He and Trey McBride have lived that way, but it's all timing. I don't know if this is true or if I'm just too close to the situation. It seems like Kyler Murray has gotten some zip taken off his deep ball, because I remember he was throwing frozen ropes in 2020 over the three levels, over the safety to Christian Kirk in Tampa Bay, where they're just frozen ropes. It's like a baseball player throwing a football. And then now, even with his touchdown passes, like he threw a 45-yarder to Marv. I can't remember. I think it was against Tennessee between two players. He's lofting these balls. Like these are like tipped balls that are just floating in the air. And, it's good for guys that can go make a play. I'm sure it worked really well with Justin Jefferson, but it's a problem when you're trying. Sam Darnold has a laser for an arm. So I remember, what was it, against San Francisco 2 years ago, from the 2-yard line to pass the 50 for what was that, a 90-yard touchdown catch to Justin Jefferson?
97.
Kyler can't do that. He can't do that. Okay. That's not to say he's not surgical from 15 yards in, but the problem is when you have, this is the biggest issue with Kyler when it comes to any sort of real offense that we've seen, is when you have a check down guy, Trey McBride, 6 yards in for the sticks, you get a first down, or you wait an extra beat and you have Marvin Harrison Jr. on a deeper swinging crossing route for 25. He takes the short route for the first down. So while it's good to move the sticks, the more time, the more, plays you have on offense, the better the opportunity for the defense to stop you when you can take that chunk play. So that was one of the more frustrating things that we've seen from Kyler. He's a smart football player, but reading his progressions, he gets a little antsy in his pantsy if he sees a pass rusher getting in his kitchen instead of waiting that extra beat, throwing the ball and taking a hit.
Yeah, another interesting thing about that, because you're right. I mean, Sam Darnold was unbelievable pushing the ball 20 plus yards down the field. And that is just not, from watching back last year's games and in 2024, that's just not happening. And
he's done it. Like, right. Big sweeping routes to Marv, but it's not something you can bank on anymore.
His 2021 throwing the ball down the field, PFF graded him a 99 in 2021 throwing it down the field, and that's not even close to the last couple of years. I don't know if the injuries have played a role in that, because if you're a smaller guy especially, you need to drive off of your legs and feet in order to rip the ball down the field. But also, we have to acknowledge that the wide receivers may have played a role in this as well, because I've often thought that deep ball success has a lot to do with just who your receivers are. I should mention that Kirk was 39th out of 40 in terms of 20 plus yard throw percentage in 2023. Like, he wasn't pushing the ball down the field at all that season. He was living in the intermediate areas. So it's not like, sometimes Kevin O'Connell is painted like 1976 Oakland Raiders or something. Like, that was because Sam Darnold could do that, because he was Ken Stabler out there. But Kirk Cousins didn't play quarterback for the Vikings that way, especially if you look at TJ Hawkinson's numbers with Kirk Cousins. They were Pro Bowl level. But, I guess what I wonder about is, I was looking back at, I think it was the 2020, might have been 2022, where he lost all the receivers to injury. And it's like, Greg Dortch is the guy for him, and he's like 5'8" or something. I mean, I think that has to play a role. And I did see the other day that DeAndre Hopkins tweeted out that he thought that Kyler Murray and Justin Jefferson would have a great connection. So I can't parse this out. It's one of the hardest things about football, is how much did offensive line, how much did wide receivers impact his ability to have some success with hanging on to the ball a little longer and pushing it downfield.
Yeah, I mean, it's the former first with the offensive line, I think, is more than anything. Like, he can't take hits. He won't take hits anymore. He gets rid of that ball real quick, throws it out of bounds, takes a sack, doesn't matter. He's been very protective over the ball since his rookie year. I mean, I think he got sacked almost 50 times his rookie year because he would not throw the ball away. He would not try to throw an interception. He would take a sack. And, now going into year 8, he's obviously stronger. He took that big iconic hit from a Jets guy who came off the edge that ripped his helmet off, and he got up and smiled. Like, couple things with the receiver. I don't think people understand how good DeAndre Hopkins is. Like, I think he's like Andre Johnson, just the most underrated wide receiver we've seen in the last 15 years since he's come in. He is so good at football. He catches quite literally everything. And he and Kyler Murray were, bliss right away that one year. But Kyler Murray, another thing he struggles with receivers, is red zone stuff. That year that they went nuts. And this could be scheme. It also could be Kyler. Is Devontae Adams had more red zone receptions than DeAndre Hopkins had targets for the entirety of the season. So he's your wide receiver one. Everybody knows he's getting the ball. Devontae Adams got the ball. DeAndre Hopkins didn't. Not even close. Didn't even get the targets. So yeah, he's only played with a couple good wide receivers. Trey McBride is obviously, but like, for me, it's depth of target. Like, is Justin Jefferson that good to where it doesn't matter where he gets the ball thrown to him, he can make plays happen after the catch. I think it's the yak thing is a big thing.
I don't think that Justin Jefferson is an elite yards after catch guy, but I also think that he doesn't need to be very open. And this would depend on Kyler. Like, he's got to throw the ball there. He doesn't need to be very open to catch everything. And he also gets open all the time. And you mentioned like those out routes. There's one that pinged right in my mind because here's a crazy stat for you, Alex. Last year, the 3 highest outputs passing for the Vikings came with Carson Wentz at quarterback. And those were all the best games of Justin Jefferson. But there were numerous times where they ran a timing route that's an out route where Jefferson starts to maybe break in like he's going to run a post and snaps back out. The ball's already in the air and he's got to catch. Him and Kirk Cousins, for sure you could see at times that Jefferson wanted Cousins to push the ball to him into traffic, more deep down the field. Also with Kirk Cousins, he was the most prolific receiver through the first 5 years of his career. I mean, so right. It's not that that he can't do pretty much anything you ask him to do. I think in the most possible ideal world, it is the Sam Darnold throwing it, treating him like Julio Jones. But I've also seen him catch every ball, every type of situation. I think the middle of the field thing does matter, though, because they love to do variations of the dagger concept where you have somebody clearing out and Jefferson breaking underneath. And I think if you can do that on time and accurately, you're going to be fine. The thing that would really be required here is communication between Kyler Murray and Kevin O'Connell, because there is somewhat of an idea, and I don't really subscribe to it, that O'Connell can't adjust his offense. I think he can, but I think he has to fully understand what Kyler Murray wants to do, and Kyler Murray has to fully agree with him in order to make this work.
Yeah, and I think outside of him telling Cliff Kingsbury to shut the bleep up in a game, Cliff's last year, Kyler's he's coach friendly. Like he doesn't have any, like, put it this way. Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals have been abused by Sean McVay for the last decade plus. If there's a disciple of Sean McVay that he's being coached by, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Like, I don't see an issue with that at all. With Kyler, his timing routes are great. Little slants, little stutters in the middle up the seam. He's great with that because they use Trey McBride so much as a wide receiver that it would be an easy transition. I know Justin Jefferson's a little bit shorter and not as stocky, but people are going to remember really quickly that in a vacuum, Kyler can be, quite literally, Matt, can be a top 10 quarterback in this league. He's either top 7 when he's at his best or bottom 5. You just don't know which one it's going to be on any given snap. So with maybe more controlled environment, maybe a better defense, maybe a little bit of better offensive line, even though you guys are losing centers, like it's going out of style. I think in that situation, you're going to see that the Arizona Cardinals were the problem more than Kyler Murray, even though Kyler did have, a good chunk of the blame in the issues as well.
When it comes to the downsides of that, what goes wrong when it's bad for Kyler Murray?
So the lowest hanging fruit for me, the one that always sticks out, is I can't remember the last time a game quarterbacked by Kyler Murray ended in victory formation. I cannot remember the last, like quite literally, I cannot remember the last time. 2024, they had 4 game-winning drives that ended in field goals back to back to back to back. But the biggest stigma around Kyler Murray was the Cardinals have the ball with 3 minutes. They're up 4 points. The other team has 1 timeout, get 3 first downs, you win the game. Never happens. Quite literally, again, never happens. So when you need something that's not, whoever it's going to be, Jordan Mason, whoever the hell it's going to be at running back, running it up the gut for 18 yards to seal the game, if it's stuffed on first down, stuffed on second down, it's 3rd and 7, he's not completing that ball. Doesn't matter. He's not completing that ball for a first down. And that could have been Cliff, could have been Jonathan Gannon and Drew Petzing, very well could have been. But that is the biggest one. If you need to go win a game with on his shoulders or salt one away that you're already leading, that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. Some of that's confirmation bias or recency bias, but by and large, that's more of the rule and not the exception to the rule.
I can't help but laugh to myself here because how in the world are we describing Kirk Cousins when talking about Kyler Murray?
Yeah,
but they couldn't be farther apart in terms of what type of quarterback they are. With, you have a stand in the pocket guy who they couldn't make move for anything versus a scrambler, an undersized quarterback. And yet they had the same problems. And I recall against the Vikings in 2024 that they had a chance to put that game away. Although Jonathan Gannon didn't go for it on fourth down with one of the fastest people playing quarterback in the league, which I think was questionable. But remember, they went up by 6 by kicking a field goal, and that's the field goal of death. And that's what a lot of this comes back down to for me, Alex, of being in support of the idea for the Vikings getting Kyler Murray, is I look at the NFLPA grades for the Cardinals, and I go, okay, their owner got an F, so this is not anything like the Vikings organization. And the coaching, I think, was graded okay, but it wasn't an A, which Kevin O'Connell has gotten every single time. The assistant coaches they put in, and they got A's. And you're like, I don't know. And you have Justin Jefferson versus a Marvin Harrison who may someday be great, but so far has not been great. And I mean, I'm guilty of retweeting somebody who put together a compilation of the drops that he had last year at the beginning of the year with Kyler. And for whatever reason, they couldn't get on the same page, but he's not Justin Jefferson. And so you start to add these things up and you go, who does this sound like? It sounds a lot like Sam Darnold, honestly. And the thing that's frustrated me a lot though, Alex, is that a lot of people keep going back to the same kind of comments on Kyler, and he plays video games. He doesn't care. He's not dedicated. And I think, how many athletes at age 22 are different from age 28? I'd like to see people give him a chance to show that. And I didn't feel like when watching back his 2024 that he didn't know what he was doing. I thought there were flaws and I thought there were mistakes and I thought there weren't great decisions, but I never watched and thought like, oh, this guy doesn't even know the plays. He's just running around there like he doesn't know what he's doing. But how do you feel about those cracks, those comments, those jokes? Like, do you feel like it's justified to some extent, or do you feel like that's just something that people are being very lazy?
Yeah, I mean, so the Call of Duty one was first. And since then, the biggest troll job he could ever do was invest in a video game company, which he has. I would much rather him play video games like every other professional athlete does. Like, give me a break, dude. Some stream, some don't. Everybody's at home and they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to go and party every night. Some are single. They're playing video games. Get off my ass with that. But the homework clause, which is like the big one, Michael Bidwell, it got leaked because the Cardinals wanted to leak it to make Kyler Murray look bad, to make his agent look bad for embarrassing them, for sending like a ransom note to get him to get the contract extension. That was probably on Kyler, but it was also on Cliff. Like, it was you had a PE coach coaching the Cardinals. You need a history teacher. You need the cool history teacher who will smack you with a ruler, but make you smarter and make you better and hold you accountable. Cliff Kingsbury was giving them 15-minute cell phone breaks and fruit trays during practice. It's like it wasn't real life. It wasn't real life back then. So that's not just Cliff Kingsbury's fault. Kyler Murray was very immature in that way coming into the league. Okay. But they were on the heels of 11-6 season. They started 7-0 and 10-2. He's the reason why they won in spite of Cliff Kingsbury, not because of him. So Kyler Murray was, he was in a raft without oars trying to figure out how the hell to get to shore. And he's leading this team. And, that's what it is. The knocks were valid at the time. Now, the only real knock is, does he love football? And number two, will he take hits to make that game-winning throw? And I don't know if the answer to the second one is yes. I don't know if the answer to the first one is 100% yes.
Well, that's why he's going to go play for the Oakland A's. I saw on TV the other day.
Dude, it'll be Vegas. Like, if they were in Vegas right. next year, just go play for the Raiders. Just do both.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, but yeah.
Deion Sanders. Also, it is also funny that Kyler Murray is, like, if you go to hischess.com and have seen him play in those chess tournaments, he is like a 98th percentile chess player in the world, which, if that was all he played, people would be like, oh my gosh, he's a genius. He's so good at chess. But because this is probably me I'm the one with literal video games in the background, but I also think like Justin Jefferson plays video games too, man. But like Stephon Diggs once said, there's truth to all rumors, and there's probably truth to some of the stuff, but it's exaggerated so much that I think we lose the fact that NFL executives have named him as a top 15 quarterback in The Athletic 5 years running. So like there's that too. I'm curious before I let you go. The Arizona Cardinals, I was just looking this up on FanDuel. Sorry to do this to you, but they're plus 3,000 to win the division next year. And when you look at these other teams, you've just got the best of the best in the National Football Conference with, the Super Bowl champs, the NFC Championship team, and then another team that was in the divisional round. Holy cow. Is the plan to sign Malik Willis and slowly build around it? Is the plan to completely tank and play, I don't know, Jimmy Garoppolo and Kent Graham for the rest of the way and then just get, Arch Manning or something? Like, what's the way here? Because it looks pretty tough.
I was having fun here until we had to actually talk about the Cardinal state
Sorry.
right now. No. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult to have to run it back with 34 combined wins in the NFC West, not including the Arizona Cardinals. It's just like the Malik Willis thing. I don't get it. I know you're an NFC North guy, obviously. I know that his coach the tape that people watch the tape, bro. He's got it in him. That was Matt LaFleur. Okay. He started 11 games in 4 years, giving a guy even Justin Fields money that he got with the Jets. It's like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, it doesn't. I've been a Jacoby Brissett stan. I know they went 1-11 with him. I know it sounds ridiculous to say that. The only reason they were able to move the ball last year was because of Jacoby Brissett. They had no run game. They had a bad right side of the offensive line. And Michael Wilson came out of nowhere and became a fantasy darling overnight. It's like, that's not just because they were down 20 plus points every game. I mean, a lot of it was when they were competing in games. I'd rather take that $20 million and give it to the best pass rusher out there and run it back with a quarterback like Jacoby Brissett. The Jimmy Garoppolo thing, very rarely have I wanted to throw my computer, very rarely, because I have restraint. If Jimmy Garoppolo is starting week 1, that's going to be difficult. He hasn't started a full season since 2021. He breathed in Vegas and got hurt, and he was out. He stole $30 million from them. It's going to be the same thing. The point is, they're shooting for 2027, obviously, but that doesn't mean that 2026 isn't going to be incredibly important in free agency and the draft to build out the rest of the roster so they can plop in a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be bad.
Well, there's really only one way there, which is to take the slow approach and then draft the quarterback in the top 10 and see what happens. It's supposed to be a good quarterback draft. That's always, who knows, right? So was this year. And now, there's only one guy. But it should be. And I think a long-term approach when you have 3 other teams that are ready to win right this moment and compete for Super Bowls is the best possible way that they could go. But if you bring Jimmy Garoppolo there, you might end up looking like the Jets did last year. I mean, it might be laughable. The one thing you can always say for Jacoby Brissett is that your team will show up on a Sunday and they will play a real football game against the other team. I used to think about this with like Ryan Fitzpatrick, perfect bridge quarterback.
Perfect example. Yeah.
Right. Because he'll throw it all over the yard and the other team can't just show up and be like, this is a joke. We don't even have to try. Jacoby Brissett will give you reasonable football, but you're probably not going to win a whole lot of football games if you're not that good. I think they should just try to bring him back. I don't know if that's something that he wants to do. Malik Willis, the only reason I would say I like the Malik Willis idea for Arizona is, yes, it's a very, very, very small sample size. I think he always looked prepared for those games, and he threw the ball extremely well with the throws that were there. You can find out for a relatively small price. Let's say that you sign him to the Justin Fields deal and it blows up and he wins 3 games and it's a joke. Okay. Well, but there at least is a world where he's pretty good. There's no world where Jimmy Garoppolo is good. There's no world where Jacoby Brissett is your future quarterback because he's already ancient. There at least is wow, you hit the lottery and got Malik Willis on a 2 or 3 year deal where he's cost effective and you can actually turn this around.
Right. No, and I agree with that. Now, the only thing is, yes, I agree with that. His efficiency is EPA for all you analytic nerds out there. You're a perfect balance of both. I will say you're a perfect balance of both. Is the efficiency level is great, but that's like saying I made 10 threes out of 10 attempts in 2025, 2026. So I'm a better 3-point shooter than Steph Curry, who only shot 44%.
Right.
And the 800 shots that he took or whatever it is. So grain of salt with it a little bit. But what I will say that's nice about Malik Willis is he carries himself really well. He's coachable, obviously. And the LaFleur ties, I take that with less strength. And who knows if Michael LaFleur is going to even know, like, it's not even close. They're blood. I don't care. The third Manning brother was one of the Manning brothers, but he never played in the NFL. It's like, it's not going to be the same. And he can't text big brother, hey, what would you do here with Malik mid-game? It's like, it doesn't make sense. I agree with the thing about taking a shot, but this is a very pivotal year for Marvin Harrison Jr. This is a very pivotal year for Michael Wilson if they don't extend him, and Trey McBride's going to be Trey McBride. Like, there's a ripple effect for taking a chance on a guy who's never thrown more than 21 balls in a game. And we don't even know who the running back's going to be for this team. So it seems more of a risk than I may be willing to take. I know it's lazy to say Jacoby Brissett, bring him back, but
no, I actually think if you signed Malik Willis and brought Jacoby Brissett back, like, does Jacoby think he's going to get a starting job somewhere? Because I don't think that's going to happen.
The Jets may start in week 1. There were rumors that they wanted to trade for him, but that's the worst case scenario in my opinion. Is like, you bring Malik Willis in, you're going to think he's going to be the starter, and then Jacoby Brissett beats him in camp, and you've got a $20 million backup. You could have had 2 pass rushers for that, or a right tackle for that. Like, the real money is at stake here with all of these big name free agents coming in and a lesser than draft. It's like, it's not just about the quarterback. If he's not going to be your quarterback for the future, and if he's just a lottery ticket, I'd rather get a dude that you know what he is, and he'll get you 10 sacks a year.
What about John Skelton? What was the guy's name? John Navarre? Was that his name?
Who?
Is that a guy?
How about Logan Thomas, who was drafted as a quarterback,
right.
but then converted into a tight end?
Who did John? I'm going to look. John Navarre. He played for, that's an Arizona Cardinal quarterback. Jesus. Okay, I didn't lose my mind there.
Many.
John Navarre, 6'6", from Wisconsin. Maybe this is why I know him. Played for the Arizona Cardinals from 2004 to 2006. A 7th-round draft pick out of Michigan. He went 2-5 as a starter with a 43.9 passer rating. John Navarre, everyone.
Yeah,
it's been worse. It's been a heck of a lot worse than Kyler Murray in Arizona. I'm just saying.
And I do want to say one thing, just so you can take a Cliff Notes thing and clip this for your brain. The 2 things that Kevin O'Connor would need to do to make Kyler Murray Pro Bowl level again is, 1, figure out the perfect balance of the rush attack. Minnesota Viking fans should not expect him to rush for 800 yards in a season. He's not Lamar Jackson. It's never going to happen again. But his ability to house it from 40, which we saw twice in 2024, that's still there. So the scheme needs to be there with the RPO. That's 1. Number 2, Jim Harbaugh did this with Alex Smith, and it made him hundreds of millions of dollars. Shrink the playbook. Make the playbook around him. Do not make him fit into any sort of offensive scheme. And Alex Smith went from being a bust in San Francisco to them making the conference championship, to him going to Kansas City. Like, shrink it. And then he will be a lot better. And that's not to say he's dumb by any stretch. It's like, build the offense around him, and everybody will thrive because of it. That's the best chance for him to thrive in a new offense.
And I think that a big help with that might be hiring Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator from Miami, Mike McDaniel's right-hand man, bringing him in to tie the run with the pass better. I do think if you're playing off of, if you have a setup for Kyler Murray where he throws 25 passes a game, I think you could be in very good shape there. I think if you're asking him to throw 45 passes a game, it's a lot harder because there's like 5 guys in the world who can rest on that. Interesting. Thank you so much though, Alex, for clarifying Kyler Murray narratives. And it seems like there's shades of truth to all things that are said about Kyler Murray, but they're always said in such extremes that we can forget that he's been really, really good at football in the NFL for a while. So I appreciate you. Locked On AZ Cards is your show. And I'll talk to you soon. Yeah, you need me to talk about, I don't know, they could sign, who's Jalen Naylor? Maybe you want Jalen Naylor. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Once things happen, I will have you around for sure.
All right. Sounds good, Alex. Appreciate you, man.
You got it, dude. Thanks. That was fun.
All right, now we welcome into the show from the Daily Delivery podcast with the Star Tribune and writes on the internet at the Star Tribune as well. Mike Rand, friend of mine. What's going on, Mike? How are you?
Not bad and good. I was just thinking like the Randball blog at StarTribune.com, which is not so much a blog anymore, but yeah, it kind of is. That started in 2006, Matthew. That's
Wow.
20 years ago. That is like 100 years in internet terms. So daily delivery's only been around for 5, which is still kind of a long time. But you know all about long tenured internet writing and internet
Well,
talking.
think about all the times that you've talked about since 2006, the Vikings quarterback situation and their hopes and dreams to find the future quarterback.
You're right. Like when that started, it was like they had like just drafted Tavares Jackson. Rest in peace. But that was a long time ago. Long time ago.
Well, this is what I wanted to talk with you about because
Yeah.
one of the things that I really enjoy about your work is that you have a lot of great historical perspective on the Minnesota Vikings and, of course, all other Minnesota sports. And I think that you really well capture the sort of torture that fans are constantly put through while also not getting maybe too dark about it. So
Right.
let's get a little meta on this quarterback
Yeah.
situation, right?
Yeah.
I think about the number of guys who have shown up randomly and succeeded for the Minnesota Vikings and how many times they've also tried to take their swing at drafting a quarterback. Like what do you think that time is a flat circle? Do you think that we are stuck in a simulation here?
I mean,
Or do you think that like this is just sort of an accident that keeps happening because the Vikings always have good wide receivers and they can never really be terrible in order to get the Drake May or the Caleb Williams or whatever?
It's they're never going to be terrible with the Wilfs as owners because the Wilfs want to win. They want to be competitive every year. So you're right. Like they're going to draft somewhere usually between 13th and 24th, right? Like and they're going to move up and down the board sometimes. And yeah, the year they got McCarthy, they started at 11th and they moved a little more. And the year that they, drafted Ponder, then they had a terrible year, and then they drafted 4th, I think, and took Khalil. But like usually, you're right, they're not in the spot to take a premium quarterback at least in the 20 years into the Wilfs, and then, so yeah, they're going to be, either reaching sometimes, which is not a good place to be when you're trying to get a first-round quarterback, or they're going to kind of be cycling through these guys. But they've done it to great success, right? Like almost every memorable season they've had since Fran Tarkenton has come with kind of this, veteran guy they brought in. Randall Cunningham had essentially retired. Like he was doing construction in Vegas, right? Like that's the story. 98, he came back in 97. He actually won that playoff game for them in 97, or more succinctly, the Giants gave them that game in 97. But Randall Cunningham, and then the next year he loses his mojo, but here's Jeff George. Then you get some years of Dante, which is kind of their only draft and develop success story, basically of the last half century. And, Bridgewater injury was a problem with him. But, you got right like that. And you got Brett Favre, of course, Case Keenum. And then you stabilize things with Kirk Cousins. Then Sam Darnold comes in, goes 14-3. Like it's always who you least expect with the Vikings. It's not the guy that they planned to have the success.
And why do we think that is? I mean, so you think it's the ownership not ever wanting to really go to the bottom. And I think that that's a really fair type of way to look at it. But I also think like there are teams, the Green Bay Packers, who draft Jordan Love, and he's not the first overall draft pick, or even Jalen Hurts is a second round pick. What was Mahomes 10th overall? Like you don't
10th, 12th. Rodgers even was like 23rd, 24th back in the day for the Packers.
Right, exactly. You don't have to have this happen time and time again. I think, some of it is just complete randomness of the universe of pro sports where, if you draft in the right year or the right spot, or you don't win that game or you win that game instead, or, maybe if they, as part of their teardown in 2023, had said, Kirk, you're going to get traded out of here and we're going to win 3 games because those top 3 quarterbacks were going to be so good. Maybe you'd have Jaden Daniels or Drake May at this moment. I think committing to that has always been really hard, in part because they always have so many good players or a good coach in place that you can't tell them to win 3 games, or you probably wouldn't anyway. Like, I don't know that Kevin O'Connell can coach a team that's going to go 3-14. He's not Urban Meyer. It's not going to happen.
No.
You would have to give him almost nothing. So does this Does this influence the way that you view what is coming next at the quarterback position, which very strongly is signaling it's another one of these reduxes of, finding the Randall Cunningham or the Jeff George? Or does past results to you not, have anything to do with what's going to happen in the future?
I don't think past results necessarily predict it, although the one thing you would say is, hey, if you had an ownership group that was maybe more willing to say, you know what, we don't mind being awful for a year or have it running the risk of being awful. Let's try this again with JJ McCarthy. Like, you liked him enough to take him number 10 overall in 2024. Obviously last year was, disastrous, maybe too strong word, but they're 4-8. A lot of that was him at that point. I know they won the last 5 games. We're grading that on a curve, but like, if you were an organization that really believed in JJ McCarthy and could stomach another year of growing pains for the possibility that you'd reach this high ceiling, maybe some of that then does fall to the ownership group, how you're structured, what your philosophy is. But some of it too is just, what happened last year wasn't pretty. So maybe they're just going to go down that route again, not because they have before, but because it's the smart thing to do. Maybe it's Kyler Murray, a guy who, has some pretty good history. It's not been as good lately, but he's, been to a couple Pro Bowls, offensive rookie of the year in 2019, I think. And, a guy who doesn't necessarily fit perfectly with like what they do, but production wise, like you can see them winning 11 games with Kyler Murray. Like that's you don't have to squint too hard to see that. So, and to circle back on your point you made about the Packers too, like I think that's a good point in that what they've done is the thing that it would be ideal for the Vikings to do, which is draft a quarterback when you don't need one. Draft a quarterback, 2 or 3 years before you need that quarterback. And so, you had both those guys, Rodgers and Love, sitting for 3 years, which is not ideal for, in the modern NFL, is not ideal for salary cap purposes, not ideal to kind of take advantage of that rookie scale contract. It was different when Rodgers was was there. That was kind of before that whole structure was in place. But like the Vikings end up drafting quarterbacks when they need quarterbacks. Like it was, Christian Ponder was like after they bottomed out after the Favre year, it's like, well, we need a quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater, they needed a quarterback. Then that might have worked out had he not gotten injured. JJ McCarthy, they needed a quarterback. Their whole plan was to pick a quarterback in 2024, and it wasn't necessarily a bad plan. They just wound up with the 5th one picked, and that's not always a good thing either. So some of it's luck, some of it's what they do, and some of it is just maybe picking a quarterback a year before you need one instead of right when you need one.
And if you do that, you're always picking the quarterback that you really, really like, as opposed to the quarterback that you need. And I go back to Dante Culpepper with that there was a lot of controversy over picking Dante Culpepper. Why are we picking quarterback when I think it was Javon Curse was out there, and he turned out to be a great player. But why are you picking a quarterback when Randall Cunningham just did this? You've got your QB, and then ultimately it turns out to be an incredibly smart move. Yeah. But with Dante and the Packers, there's also another part of this that is patience, that they did not force Dante onto the field, because really, they could have in 1999 when the wheels came off for Randall Cunningham, and instead they said, nope, we're going to stick with Jeff George. Didn't hurt that Jeff George played the best football of his career by far.
Like 8-2. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And there were some games where he's thrown for 350 yards and it's just spectacular. So of course, you've got that ahead of the young quarterback. But if Dante plays then, who knows how it ends up looking, as opposed to getting that entire year. And I think with this, if you're a Vikings fan that believes that there is some sort of curse that is hovering over your franchise, that's always going to throw the worst possible things in when you think it's going to go good, this situation might be pretty good evidence for you. The fact that they had the right plan with JJ McCarthy, they wanted to do that with JJ McCarthy, and then were not able to because of a meniscus injury. And then I think overestimated how quickly he could bounce back and get back on track. But where do you stand with McCarthy just in general? Like, I see your point about, hey, maybe in a different world or in a vacuum, it would make sense to just play it out. And if it goes terribly, then you draft high. I don't think that's very realistic considering you need Justin Jefferson to continue to be a Viking. And ultimately, even as mad as everyone gets at their head coach, it's a better outcome if Kevin O'Connell proves he can do it again with another quarterback for you long term. You'd much rather have him for a decade than you would have to fire him and then go out and hope and dream that you can get the next coach. But where do you stand with like what this all means for JJ McCarthy?
I mean, I don't think it's good. None of what's happened this offseason is good. None of it's good for how they feel about him in 2026, right? Like you can't, nothing that they've said makes you say, oh man, they really love JJ McCarthy as their quarterback in 2026. Like everything they're doing. Like I wrote something on Friday where it was basically like kind of, I labeled their 2026 plan the competitive undoing. So they want to be good still, but they're doing everything differently than they did last year. They're like, that didn't work, right? Like all these high price free agents we signed, let's get rid of those guys. That didn't work. The quarterback plan, the thing we should have done last year, which was bring in somebody who, could at the very least compete for the starting job, that you knew who your 1, 2, 3 was in, March instead of August. Let's do this completely differently. Like they're basically doing this year what they should have done last year in terms of quarterback. And maybe things would have turned out differently if they'd done that. Like it's just, McCarthy was weird. The thing we forget about McCarthy too is like, here's a guy who, if you're going back to it, like his 2 best games last year were probably, at least his best quarter was that quarter against the Bears in week 1. And then, it just gets weird. He becomes a father in the middle of that week. Like I can't imagine what that would be like at then age, 22 still at that point, 23 now. And then he gets hurt at the ankle. If it's Patrick Mahomes in Super Bowl week, he's probably back a little faster, but then he comes back and plays pretty well against Detroit. And you're like, okay, like when he's had a little chance to kind of like take some air out from underneath it or kind of like, think about it, settle down a little bit. He's shown he can do it. The Dallas game was pretty good too. I thought that might've been his best throwing game, but overall the body of work, I mean, it was just, you at the baseline, you could look at it and you say, you can't go into 2026 with that as the plan again. So I think Kyler Murray's perfect fit. I mean, he's not stylistically the perfect fit, but like for their cap situation to be able to bring in a guy who's still mid-career, who's a former first overall pick, who's had some good seasons, who's shown that he can throw the ball to a really good wide receiver, and you can bring him in for a little over $1 million. Like that's a pretty good setup for the Vikings in 2026, even if it might not be the sort of linear development you'd like from McCarthy.
Yeah, on the Kyler Murray thing, what I've been saying is that no one has watched Kyler Murray play football in quite a long time. But if you look at how he played in his 2024 season, even with a supporting cast that is not as good as what the Vikings can give him and a first-time offensive coordinator, he still played well enough to that if they had him this year, his 2024 production, they would have won 11 or 12 games pretty easily. And then, there's so many things that I just think are bad arguments against Kyler. Like, well, he's not a pocket quarterback. Like, okay, wasn't this one of the reasons that KOC talked about drafting McCarthy was that he was a playmaker? Right. And don't we constantly complain about every loss up front because the quarterback will get sacked or hit, that someone who could run away might be a good thing for them? And yeah, your point, the high peaks of Kyler Murray, even if it's earlier in his career when he has DeAndre Hopkins, who sounds a lot like Justin Jefferson, were pretty high. They're not perfect, but they were pretty high. On the matter of JJ McCarthy, I think that bringing in someone for 1 year doesn't have to mean that it's over for him. And that's something for the JJ people who try all sorts of different ways to make that work. Like, well, if you only look at the last 4 games and don't even consider the fact that he got hurt several more times during those games, then what you'll see is, and you're like, look, man, it's just, when the team is doing this and talking like this, it's pretty clear that they're not comfortable with starting him. But I also think that in a universe where we've seen so many quarterbacks get time to develop behind the scenes, I think if you have a number 9 jersey and you became the biggest JJ McCarthy fan ever after that one preseason game against the Raiders, you should be happy that they're not going to throw him out there again and have him be in over his head. And then it all goes to hell after that, because if he starts again and plays poorly, then it's really over. Then he's not going to be a Vikings quarterback at all. Yeah. He's probably going somewhere else to be a backup. And maybe he'll show up in 2031 as somebody's starter that wins 12 games or something. Right. So I think from the team's perspective, it's actually better to have someone like Kyler Murray or Geno Smith start for this season, get the franchise back on track. I've been calling it the get right offseason. So it's funny that we both kind of have made nicknames for it, but I just think it's better for him.
Yeah. The hard part is it's just contractually hard, right? Because everything's the timeline is off by a year with him because of the knee injury, right? Like ideally, this is all happening. And if if we're talking about him coming off a rookie year where he struggled and that happened, and then it's year 2 and you're like, yeah, okay, got to bring somebody in. And then, okay, maybe a fresh start in year 3. And then you really see what happens in year 3. What the problem is, you get into next year, and then by May of 2027, you got to decide on his 5th-year option. You got to decide on that before he's even potentially played again. And then you're kind of talking about, well, you're going to do some kind of Jordan Love bridge deal. You're going to do a kind of rip it up and do a short, multi-year, 2-year extension. You can do it. You can kind of finesse it before you've really seen it if you like him, but you've lost a lot of the value, right? You've lost a lot of the value of the rookie contract at that point, and that's supposed to be some of what they're getting out of this whole thing. And then you also have the potential for a complication. What if Kyler Murray plays great? What if they win 12 games? What if it's okay, this isn't some 37-year-old who's coming in to bridge for a year. He ostensibly is, and he'd be a lot more expensive in 2027 if he played well this year. But you just saw what happened with Sam Darnold. You let a really good quarterback walk out the door because you believed in McCarthy. He won a Super Bowl in Seattle. It wasn't all him, but he certainly was a factor. That becomes complicated. Then you're like, okay, I could talk myself into a multi-year extension for Kyler Murray, and then it's over for JJ.
What do you think of it's so funny because there isn't any actual moves yet, but we just know about the moves.
Right.
We know that they're considering trading Grenard. We know that they're going to cut Allen and Hargrave and Aaron Jones, and that there's some more to come. But so try to evaluate Rob Brzezinski based on some reports about what are about to happen next week. But what do you think about, as we talked about this offseason approach, which is a little bit different than I thought it was going to be with Rob Brzezinski in charge? Because I think that what we all thought was, okay, well, now this kind of belongs to the coaches for the decision makers, but it's been much more of I am the captain now with Rob Brzezinski, and I'm going to get that salary cap right, and I'm going to build through the draft. And it was notable that on one of his Vikings.com conversations, he did say, I believe in building through the draft, which really perked my ears up of oh, okay, that means stockpiling some draft capital and getting going toward the future. Well, you're still expected to win right now. But that's also awkward with the timeline of Kevin O'Connell having 4 years into his regime here, and then now without the GM that he was with for those first 4 years. What do you make of all those dynamics?
I think it's interesting. I think Brzezinski is operating like a guy who thinks he might have this job long-term, because these are long-term moves, right? These are not if you're trying to make KOC and Flores happy, you're probably not dangling Jonathan Grenard or cutting guys who, even if they didn't play as well as you thought they would play, still brought value to the team. You're trying to let's squeeze it all in. Let's, push it back. Rob, go do your tricks. And he's probably sick of this because he's like, I've had to do this so many times. You guys, I just got you out of this box 2 years ago with all of the Spielman contracts. We were finally in a good place, and then we went and loaded up again in 2024 and 2025, and now we got to do this all over again where we're getting the books right. But they are operating in a space where I think they're being pretty realistic about 2026. I think they'd like to compete, and the quarterback move doesn't cost them a lot, probably, if it's Geno or Kyler Murray, if they bring those guys in, but it does help them be able to compete more this year, even if they're losing some of these, veterans in other places. So it's interesting. He's operating from a place of long-term vision, which it makes sense. He's been here for a quarter century. He's seen it all. He's seen the whole arc. But the Grenard thing is maybe the one that's most interesting, because That's a guy who helps you win right now, no matter what. But he's also a guy who could help you clear cap space. He's also a guy who, if he's traded soon, could help you replenish some draft capital, could help you in this year's draft potentially too. So if you're trying to get younger, if you're trying to kind of restockpile for the future, the Grenard trade is one that where you're like, okay, like if that happens, that's taking it a little step further. That's a move where you're like, you didn't have to do that. That's more philosophy than it is have to.
But if you start kind of going down that rabbit hole and think about, hey, 2027, right, 2028, the franchise will continue at those points. If you were to get even just say like a second and a third for Jonathan Grenard, and then maybe you trade down and pick up another third or another second or whatever it might be in the draft, all of a sudden you're looking at a lot of fresh talent that's coming in an attempt to refresh the roster, which doesn't always work because draft picks are random, but it does feel like the right approach when you've run to the certain end of one approach and you really don't have a path out, is to start thinking about down the road, and can you get some immediate starters and immediate players that will help, and then spend your money in a smart way that's not going to lock you into anything into the future, like 1-year deals, veteran players, or rolls of the dice for younger guys that are 26 hitting free agency that might have a next gear or something like that. It's just that it happened earlier than I thought it was going to happen. And the thing I can't help but think about is, what if JJ McCarthy had been pretty good? Like, how different would this be? I don't know that they're getting rid of Hargrave and Allen, because those guys did bring, value to the table and played especially well down the stretch. I don't know that you're only restructuring 1 or 2 contracts just to get cap compliant. I think you're probably restructuring everything that moves. It's really remarkable how so much hinges on just that one position. Is there a previous time that you have followed this team that this reminds you of? Because I've got a year in mind, and maybe I'm just trying to force this a little bit, but I've kind of got a year in mind.
Let me think. I mean, in terms of like everything that's kind of coming to a head and young quarterback that you're not sure about or kind of uncertainty, like me, I'm trying to think. Like, feels a little bit like early Zimmer, like 16 or 17. What are you thinking of?
I guess I was going back to kind of like 08, where I felt like there was there's a lot of talent in 08. Being 08 was last year. So of course that makes Kyler Murray, Brett Favre, which might be a little on the aggressive side. But when you think about, now they weren't resetting in 2010 and the salary cap was different and, a lot of previous CBA. And so it's not the same world as it is now. But last year it was kind of like JJ McCarthy and Carson Wentz are Gus Frerotte and Tavares Jackson. And they had a lot of talent on defense and they were able to win some games. And I'm sure at the time that there were a lot of people who said, hey, stick with Tavares Jackson. He's shown some flashes. He had that game against Arizona. Like he had a lot of moments, at least, that you could sort of grip onto. But then they got a real quarterback that people were down on. Brett Favre, by the way. They were down on Sam Darnold when he got here. They were down on Jeff George when he got here. I'm just pointing that out, that it's not the first time. And then maybe you have enough there in terms of talent to make a real run at it. I did see Dan Graziano on ESPN saying the Vikings would be a legitimate contender with Kyler Murray. And I was like, I still don't think that's crazy, even if they reset some of the stuff here.
It's a good comp because you had Adrian Peterson back then as an all-world talent. You got Justin Jefferson now. So you still got plenty of talent here. Like you're worried always at some point that everyone's going to age out at the wrong time, or enough guys are going to age out at the wrong time, and then suddenly Van Ginkel, Cashman, whoever else you want to put in that mix, maybe some guys on offense too, like all of a sudden they're not the players they were, and then the defense goes from like top 5 to like 13th, and you're like, okay, this doesn't, that's not a championship formula. Like I feel like next season they could have a top 5, top 10 defense still, but they could still potentially have a top 10 offense if they got the passing offense going. That's a good formula. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good comp. That time in the late 2000s was kind of weird because it just didn't seem like they could get quarterback right. And it was everything else around it was great. That's why they went and got Favre ultimately. And that, it was great until it wasn't. Then it fell apart in 2010 and then they hit reset. But yeah, you could see it. I think those teams were probably better. Like, yeah, that team went 10-6. This one last year went 9-8. But, that team, they won the division. They hosted a playoff game that year. They lost, but I think they lost to the Giants, but they hosted a playoff game. It was the Eagles. And anyway, so I think that team was better. I don't know if this team is just a quarterback away. I feel like there's more holes on this year's team than there were maybe at that point. But I think it's fair to say, hey, it's not when they got decent quarterback play last season, they won. Like that was basically it. Like when they got functional quarterback play last season, they won the game. And when they didn't, they lost. So if they had a quarterback who gave them a chance to win 80% of the time instead of 40 or 50% of the time, that would be a big difference.
It was a pick six by Tavares Jackson against the Eagles that kind of put the final nail in the coffin there. And you're right. I mean, they had Antoine Winfield. They had Jared Allen. Those are, I think Winfield was a Hall of Fame caliber player, and great. Jared Allen is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
They may not have that on defense right now, but they also have the premier defensive coordinator in the entire NFL who managed a top 5 defense despite playing uphill the entire season.
Yeah.
If your offense is doing nothing for you, you are on the field all the time. And I had this stat yesterday that the Vikings faced the fewest number of pass attempts in the entire league because other teams were just ahead and they were running the ball on them all the time. Like, that doesn't help you get sacks and turnovers and all those things. And yet still, I think they were 7th in points allowed and top 5 in yards and points per drive allowed. I don't think it's crazy to say Brian Flores continue to elevate that defense.
No.
And if you're in the top 10-ish in offense, then you're right there. You could also maybe look at it as a bit of a 2019 season and Kyler Murray is just Kirk, because they're both very, very different quarterbacks. They're both kind of in that 14th best quarterback in the league range.
Mm-hmm.
And you've sort of run to the end of one thing. And now it's going to have to go through something after this, but this is your last swing at it. And you probably have enough to at least make it interesting or serious. So one more thing for you. Mm-hmm. On FanDuel, the Vikings are plus 700 to win the division, which is 4th out of 4. It is, if you're looking at it on paper, it's a pretty nasty division. And all the teams are having similar conversations about trying to fill those big holes to get to the point where they are serious Super Bowl contenders rather than just being good teams. Who is the next most interesting team to you in the NFC North for the coming week of free agency and into the draft?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the Bears are interesting because they just lost their center. He just retired. That was a out of left field. Here's the thing about getting too far ahead of like what division's gonna be good and how these teams stack up. If the Vikings would have had good quarterback play, like they just kept Sam Darnold last season, and part of the argument probably in that case was this is gonna be a pretty tough division. Like we're gonna, let's get our development in. Let's kind of load up for better times. They could have won that division. That turned out to not be a great division. It was a good division still, but the Bears won the division. The Bears were not a great team. The Bears are a great regression candidate. I like Ben Johnson as a coach, but they're a great regression candidate because they won so many weird games last season. Some of that's just playmaking and some of that's just luck. You would think Detroit bounces back. I think Jordan Love is your modern day Kirk Cousins. He's destined to always be in the 8 to 10 win range. So good for Green Bay. You didn't get your next Hall of Famer. You got your next Hall of Good guy, and you can just keep going 9-8 every year. I think the Bears though are interesting. What did they do to build on what they did, especially now that they have a sudden massive hole to fill? Because getting center figured out last season was so instrumental for what Caleb Williams was able to do. And if they have to solve that again, in addition to other things they got to solve, they could be in some trouble.
The scary part about the Bears is that Caleb Williams didn't even throw the ball that well. In fact, he was below average in terms of just as a thrower, not playmaker, not scrambling, not out of structure, but just drop back and throw. And if he figures that out and takes another step, the regression could go out the window. The same thing if they pick up a bunch of players on defense and fill out. They've been clearing cap space like crazy, so you can sort of get the sense that maybe Max Crosby is coming their way, or somebody who's a serious impact player on defense. And I think with Jordan Love, the other scary part for the Vikings would be if there is a next level to Jordan Love. Because, well,
if they let him, if they would just let him play him like you do Malik Willis.
Right. I know. Yeah. And also the receiver thing, they just can never really quite lock it in. But my friend, and probably yours, Drew McGarry, who is an unofficial member of the Minnesota media somehow. He calls Jordan Love the socially acceptable Kirk Cousins. And I think that's true because he's big and he's got the big arm. Yeah. I also think that quarterbacks like him, sort of Joe Flacco, Eli Manning, if it clicks in and they get hot at the right time, and Sam Darnold is like this. I put Sam Darnold in the same category. Sam Darnold had an up and down season for Seattle, but got hot at the right time and won the Super Bowl. That's the fear there, but they have to rebuild an offensive line. Like there's so much work. The Taylor Decker is leaving Detroit, and then they don't have Frank Ragnow, and they got to rebuild. So all these teams have arguments for being good, but nobody has an argument for being great, which to me says take your best swing at it with either Coller or Geno Smith or whoever else you're going to bring in, and then just see where the winds take you at quarterback in the future. But unfortunately, Mike, that's been the place that the Vikings have been for so long.
Playbook for the last 50 years, Matthew. And has it yielded a Super Bowl appearance? As it has not. We are coming up on 50 years since they even made it to a Super Bowl. So maybe they should rethink that strategy at some point.
Are you like a they'll never win the Super Bowl guy, or do you think that they can?
No, I'm not like believing in curses, but like, you know what? Like the Favre year, like it's just like they tend to lose in these like spectacular fashions, right? Like obviously 98 was its own animal where you should have beaten the Falcons, should have at least gone to the Super Bowl. You were the best team in the conference. I know Atlanta was 14-2, but you were the best team in the conference. You were like a double-digit favorite. You just lost that game. The Favre game is the one that really like it just hurts because of the way it played out. Like they played everything they did that day except the turnovers. And of course, that's a pretty big deal. You lose the turnover battle 5-0, you're usually going to lose the game. I believe that was what the final tally was. And then, of course, the Minnesota Miracle year, it's like the Minneapolis Miracle year, like the Super Bowl's here, it's destiny. And then they can just absolutely run in Philly. So, and then the 41 donut. So like all their championship game losses have been memorable in some way, shape, or form, but it's not like it can't happen. Like, you've seen there was that whole run of like teams breaking those supposed curses along the way, the Cubs and the Red Sox a while back. You've seen it happen. It can happen. It just would be nice, like, to see them go into a year again where you knew that they were one of the best teams. They haven't done that for a long time. And some of that's just a function of never really seeming to have quarterback figured out until they do.
Yeah, I think about how close, even in 17, if Julio Jones comes down with the ball in the end zone, then Matt Ryan throws him at the goal line, Atlanta's got to come here.
Yeah.
And I think Atlanta was a pretty flawed team at that point, and they would have had the full rest and no travel and everything else. And Philadelphia was the best top to bottom roster in the NFL that year. And on down the line of regrets and what ifs, but someday it feels like one of those won't be there, or one of the things will fall into place, like all the 49ers players getting hurt and then playing Seattle. It's like, why does that ever seem to happen with the Vikings? But someday,
or the Patriots path last year where they just got to.
Yeah, someday I think it will. Mike Rand Ball on the internet. If you're not subscribed to the Star Tribune, then there's something wrong with you. And the Daily Delivery podcast, which covers the entire breadth of this tragic sports scene in ways that no one else does. So Mike, you're the perfect man for the job. And I appreciate you coming on, dude.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it.